Good evening, dear friend. Today we will explore the story of the Minotaur, a hybrid of a man and a bull with the head of an animal and the body of a man. We will learn how he ended up in a huge labyrinth and became a prisoner forever, but until one epic moment. And first, don't forget to tell me what city you are from and what time it is where you are. Beneath a sky washed with the milk of constellations, an island rises, long-shouldered and lion-backed, shaped by wind and salt into a throne for kings who kept their courts on gleaming floors. Crete keeps its secrets the way a shell keeps the sound of the sea, not to deceive but because it cannot help its echo. Olive trees lean like listeners, bees stitch light between blossoms the colour of old parchment. Far inland, a hill hums faintly, as if bees had moved under the skin of earth. The hum is stone upon stone, passages threaded, right angles turn to questions, questions turn to turns again. A lantern moves, then another, and in that measured glow the mouth of a hallway looks like a thought opening. Somewhere a drum mutters, somewhere a conch answers. Beneath the courtyards painted with leaping bulls, beneath the stairs rubbed smooth by sandals, the earth has begun to arrange its darkness into a pattern. Even in daylight, the air below smells of lime and shadow, cool on the tongue. In that cool, faint as a sigh sealed in plaster, a promise grows, slow as stalactite, patient as a god. Stories begin earlier than their first word. Before doorways and torches, before terror took a shape, there was a bargaining king who listened to the surf and thought it was applause. He asked the sea for proof, and the sea, which is a god's wandering garment, sent up a white marvel that shone like morning milk. Promises have the weight of waves, and men sometimes let a wave pass without returning it. The gods, who are not patient to be treated as ornaments, laid a silence over the island that sounded like praise to those who had not yet learned to hear it. In that silence the palace brightened, festivals multiplied, garlands thickened at thresholds, and the drums were taught to beat steadier. The wind brought nothing but salt and the thin crying of gulls, and yet somewhere beneath the steady politeness of daylight a different tide was turning. The king counted his victories on his fingers, and did not notice that the fingers had become a fist. In the courtyards beneath the cinnabar bulls with crescent horns, a shadow moved like a thought that would not be dismissed. When it passed through the queen's eyes, something like a star sank and began to spin. Even now, before the child is swaddled, the hall's to be breathe. The builder has not yet drawn breath to boast, yet the air in the corridors already knows the scent of olive lamps, fear sweat and damp limestone. If you listen beneath the hum you can hear something softer, the syllable of a name almost spoken, not the word monster, though that will come, and not the word God, though that will hover like heat. The name is a secret the stones will keep as a kindness. A boy who will need time to learn his borders, a boy whose borders will be argued by others. The hill, which is a skull stuffed with corridors, hears him in possibility the way a seashell hears the sea, it left behind. Deep under tiles painted with spirals, a future is stirred with a wooden spoon. The nursemaid's hands have not yet lifted him, yet already the island adjusts the tilt of its voice to cradle the shape that will be added to its speech. The mainland sleeps, but Crete lies awake and feels the pulse of a dream moving through it, and does not know whether to be afraid. Let the island be itself a body. The harbours are parted lips. The mountain is a shoulder turned toward distant thunder. In the courtyards the dancers turn like thought, feet searching for a line that will not break, and in the shrines the bulls are painted with cinnabar. Heavy-necked, leaping as if gravity were only a suggestion, the priestess could ignore. Cretans excel at ceremony, at making the world pause and look, at pouring oil over the heads of moments until they glow. They dress their worries in gold. They braid their anxieties into ribbons. They balance on the backs of living strength and fly as if the future were a platform built for vaulting. Beneath the noise of festival, beneath the snows of crushed shell on courtyards, a knowledge prickles like hair at the nape. Wind combs the flags until each bright square remembers its place in the sky. The sea claps slowly, patient as law. In the palace, laughter is served with spiced figs, and the night approaches across the terraces as if it were an honoured guest. The lamps tip their little suns into bowls of oil, and the city's breath evens. Above all this, the moon approves for a while and loosens its hair over the terraces. There is a craft to making prisons. The first art is measure, the second is mercy, which is to say the chance of turning back. The labyrinth will take the first and neglect the second. Its maker, a man the world calls clever, has learned too much about straight lines to trust them. He draws squares until they begin to look like waves, then folds the waves into corridors. He speaks to the ground with strings and pegs. He listens to chalk and plum as if they were oracles. He tells himself a story about duty, about safety kept safe, about doors made to protect. He is not lying, though he is not wholly right. To make a maze is to make a mind that is not your own and ask others to live inside it. He hammers, he hums, he calculates how darkness travels. He counts not people, but turns. He designs pauses that taste like wells. He lets the corners breathe so that fear has room to flower, and does so quietly, so that no one will call it cruelty. When he rests, he imagines a jar brimming with amber honey, sweet but contained. The gods overhear and smile without teeth. Across the water, other cities sleep and dream of ships with red sails. Their harbours widen like eager mouths. In cradles, futures practice their breathing. In workshops, boys polish bronze until their faces look back at them and promise deeds. A thin thread of rumour has not yet been spun, but somewhere a girl is learning the tenderness of knots. Somewhere a boy measures shadows at noon and wonders how truth can have shape. Because stories speak to one another across the dark like shepherds flashing lanterns, this one will touch them all. It will lay a path of light that others will follow, stepping more lightly, armed with knives sharpened on their fathers' names. They do not know yet that the island is teaching a word to the world, a word that means both shelter and snare. In temples, smoke writes its slow grammar on the rafters. In doorways, people lean and talk about taxes, weather, births and ships. The sea keeps its ledger in salt, and nothing written there is forgotten. Come closer to the hill that hums. Put your ear to the earth. You will hear water, and you will hear footsteps, and under both the slow syllables of a creature breathing out a future it does not yet wear. In the palace, the midwives fold linen. In the stables, the great bulls steam like winter springs. The queen's gaze is an altar flame that does not flicker. The king counts crowns in his mind and watches the horizon for a messenger that does not come. The builder presses his palm to rock the way a doctor listens to a chest. The people sleep and dream of fruit, of clear wells, of strong suns, of girls with wrists like willow switches. Night holds them all as a shawl holds heat. The stars lean nearer. Somewhere under the tiles a frog begins and stops. Somewhere under the hill a breath draws in and does not finish, as if the earth itself were learning how to hold a heartbeat without breaking it. The island waits, balanced on its broad back as if at the lip of a new word. We have not yet descended, and already the air is cool with stone. We have not yet named him, and already the name answers from the deepest turn. Listen to the refrain the island composes: horn and hearth, salt and shadow, promise and price. The sea keeps time, the bees keep pitch, the builder keeps measure, and somewhere under the drums of dance as a second heartbeat begins, stubborn and frightened and strong. The story is a door. It opens inward. Step with me, and keep your breathing slow, for within this measured air even fear must move at the pace of a procession. We will go by lamplight when the time is right, carrying our quiet, like a bowl filled to the rim, careful not to spill. Ahead there is a boy whose hunger will be mistaken for fury, and whose loneliness will be taught to roar. Ahead there is a king building a reason he will not admit. Ahead there is a maze learning to think. You will hear the world change in the turnings. Do not hurry your heart. Let each step find its echo, and let the echo guide the next. Now, breathe with me into the next turn, because the island has decided. The conch is lifted, the drum's palm changes, and in upper chambers a cry begins its long descent towards stone. The name has not yet been spoken, yet the corridors seem to answer. Dust shivers as if listening. At the threshold of a painted room the queen stands, hair dark as a nightbird, eyes holding a weather the palace cannot read. She has kept company with oracles, and with her own silence, and both brighten like oil in a lamp. Once, not long before this cry, the god who travels as surf set a white bull upon the shore, a brightness shaped like strength. It asked to be honoured and returned to the robe of waves. Minos kept it, a sunrise tethered to a courtyard, and the sea drew back without its gift. All thefts of radiance have consequences. Pacifier felt the Sea Lord's attention move through crate like an underground current, loosening the buckles of ordinary longing and fastening in their place an otherworldly ache, a command phrased as desire by a power beyond correction. It was not madness and not mere whim, it was the god's sentence written through a mortal life. From that grammar came a child the island could not yet imagine. On the night of birth the palace smelled of linen and olive oil, of rain cooled on stone. Lamps leaned their halos together. Midwives moved like careful birds. When the child's breathing found the room, it came in two blended timbres, human and echo, as if his chest had been taught by distant caves. No roar, only a wet brilliance and a hush. From the tender crown of his head, pale nubs lifted like moons learning their curve. The queen's tears salted his brow. She kissed the air above him, as if sealing a promise that must live in quiet. They wrapped him, and the world seemed to pause in order to fit both tenderness and omen under one shawl. Mino stood at the bedfoot with the stance of a man before a storm he cannot tax. Kings are trained to greet marvels with poses. This one asked him to drop all poses and try simple looking. He could not. The curve of horn felt like the god's handwriting across his household. He called for prudence, which is a palace word for secrecy. Doors were shut gently. Rugs learned to drink whispers. Nursemaids smelled of milk and worry. At dawn the city woke to processions and bright drums and did not know that in the hill a new pattern had begun. The king counted victories and suddenly found himself counting turns. The builder went down into that cool and began to draw air into corridors. He measured with chords, argued with corners, coaxed light wells where noon could fall like blessing but never like a spear. He told himself he was making safety. He told himself a cradle must have sides. He walked until his thoughts turned by habit and could not cross a strait. He listened and the ground answered with small sounds of approval. He designed pauses like wells where breath could steady. He braided mercy into stone by spacing fear with light. He did not yet call it a labyrinth. He called it necessary shelter. Milk sweetened the chambers. Linen learned the boy's weight. He took the air into his wide ribs and gave it back, warmed. His horns found a gentle arc, more diadem than weapon to those who loved him. His eyes were lake dark, pools that caught lamplight and returned it as patience. He learned the footsteps, the builder's measured quiet, the queen's swift hush of silk, the king's guarded tread like a thought wrapped in bronze. He reached for bowls with hands that were hands, and he nuzzled the lifted rim like a calf tasting moonlight in water. When he slept, the air around him slowed as if to guard the sleep. Sometimes the queen brought him to the light wells and sang. She sang not of cattle or courts, but of the little nations within the hive, of bees who make order out of hunger and turn wildness into food. Asterion, so she named him, starborn, listened and felt his own hunger find a place to sit. He liked the sound of water arguing gently with itself in the channels. He liked figs pressed into paste and the quiet game a moth played with the lantern's veil. He liked the deep jar's cool belly humming when his palm slid across its curve. In these likes a person gathered, shy and exact. Yet an island has many ears. Rumour drifted like pollen. Servants touched railings with damp eyes and left salt that told stories to hands. Boys dared one another to count steps until the cold began. Words such as omen and monster tested their teeth in the dark. They did not fit the mouths of those who loved him, but they hunted along walls. Above ground the white bull paraded, a brightness that set shadows behind people whether they wished it or not. Games were called, garlands swung. Minos, seeking to persuade the sky with spectacle, made the drums speak longer, as if applause could edit memory. The sea did not forget. Poseidon is a ledger written in foam, and every kept line returns. Athena tilted her head toward the builder's cleverness. Apollo watched the king practice festivals when he owed truth. Omens thickened. A falcon dropped a fish on the palace step, like a debt repaid too late. A girl woke laughing from a dream of corridors where doors breathed. Night gathers its hush along the listening stones. Night gathers its hush, and within that hush the child grows. Asterion, horned and human, learns his corridors as other children learn fields. The labyrinth has become his playmate. Its turns his riddles, its shadows his guardians. He places his palm against the cool wall and feels the steady patience of stone, as though the rock itself were promising him companionship. His footsteps grow louder with strength, echoing back to him in doubled voices, one human and one cavern deep. He follows those echoes as if chasing older brothers he will never see. In the pools where trickling water gathers, he leans over and watches his reflection tremble, a face half boy and half bull shimmering together, inseparable. Sometimes he smiles, sometimes he lowers his head in shy confusion, not yet knowing why the world above might fear such a reflection. Pacifier visits when she can, carrying fruits, honey and songs. Her presence is a lantern, her voice a shawl thrown over his shoulders. She sits with him at the light wells, where day spills down in narrow columns, turning dust into falling stars. She teaches him the names of herbs pressed between her fingers, thyme, sage, myrtle, and teaches him that each leaf has its own spirit, each scent its own courage. He listens, and the horns upon his head seem to bow, as if he understands that the world, though wide, can be gathered into small things that heal. He learns not only the softness of figs and the strength of milk, but the rhythm of a lullaby that can quiet even his own restless heart. Minos rarely descends. When he does, he brings the weight of decision with him, a figure of bronze judgment gliding down stairs meant for more human burdens. He watches the boy with eyes that never rest, measuring not his tenderness but his threat. He sees the broadening shoulders, the lengthening stride, the hunger that grows in him more fiercely than in other children. Minos feels the labyrinth itself leaning closer, as if it had chosen its true master, not the king who ordered its building, but the child who breathes within it. Yet Minos cannot admit what his mind whispers. He orders more guards, more secrecy, and when he turns away he leaves the echo of his sandals like iron across stone. Rumour in the palace tightens into ritual. Some whisper that the boy is divine punishment. Others murmur he is a sign of protection, a hidden power waiting for its hour. No one agrees, but all speak softly, for walls in Crete are never deaf. Servants bring food down the winding paths, laying it near him with trembling hands. Some leave quickly, averting their eyes, yet others linger, surprised to find gentleness in the boy's gaze, a curiosity that seems more human than monstrous. When he tilts his head and breathes out slowly, their fear slackens, and they almost reach to touch his hair before they remember the horns and step back into their caution. The labyrinth, too, is changing. Its air grows seasoned with his presence, as if his breath has become part of its mortar. The walls sweat in summer, and he runs his hand along their dampness, as if tracing veins. In winter the cold presses in, and he curls against the stones, listening to them creak and contract like bones. He does not call it prison. He does not know that word in his heart. He knows only that the walls are steady companions, that they do not strike nor turn away, that they offer paths to follow and mysteries to chase. To him the labyrinth is not cruelty, but home, a vast body whose heart beats slowly with his own. At night his dreams deepen into the language of beasts. He dreams of hooves upon the grass, of horns locking in ceremonial play, of great brown eyes staring across fields of dust. He also dreams of human laughter, voices calling his name without hesitation, hands clapping him on the back in welcome. He wakes between the two, neither dream fully claimed, and his breath fogs the winter air. Sometimes he moans low and long, not from anger but from the ache of wanting to be known wholly. The sound rolls through the corridors like a chant, startling guards above who swear they have heard thunder underground. The queen knows. When she hears his cry rising faintly through the floors, her heart tightens with grief. She strokes her hair back and whispers to the gods, asking why tenderness must wear horns, why innocence must carry the shape of judgment. She continues her offerings, continues her songs, but she cannot remove the silence the gods have written around her child. She fears the day when Minos will look upon Asterion and see not a son but a tool, not a boy but a necessity for rule and fear. For kings understand too well how terror can be paraded, how awe can be fastened into power. Seasons wheel. Asterion grows taller, his horns curving with grace, his body stronger, his hunger heavier. He learns to pace the corridors, counting steps, measuring the turnings with the instinct of one who has been given both the gift and the burden of endless wandering. He learns where the stone drips, where bats hang, where faint daylight lingers like a distant blessing. Yet no door leads outward. He senses it without bitterness, for he has no memory of sky as belonging. And still, deep in his chest, there stirs a wondering, a tug, as though something beyond the stone calls him by a name he has not yet heard. Above, Crete shines with festivals. The bull leapers vault. Crowds shout. Garlands tremble. The white bull still stamps the earth, its breath steaming like incense. The gods watch. The sea rolls its unspent demand, and the labyrinth listens, storing the boy's footsteps in its memory, storing the queen's songs, storing the king's guarded silences. Somewhere in that storehouse of echoes, fate sharpens itself quietly. Somewhere in the storehouse of echoes, fate sharpens itself quietly, like a blade honed under cloth so that no glint betrays its edge. Above the labyrinth's mouth, The palace grows crowded with ceremony. Minos, ever restless, feels the pressure of the sea's silence as though Poseidon himself breathes against his crown. No gift is forgotten. No insult sleeps forever. The king seeks to turn his unease outward, to braid fear into law, and so his thoughts turn toward his son in shadow, the one whom he names only when the room is empty. He does not speak Asterion. He whispers beast beneath his breath, as if renaming could sever the boy from tenderness. The queen resists this. Pacifier carries figs into the corridors and leaves them where small lamps glimmer. She sits upon the stones and strokes her child's hair, running her fingers carefully around the base of the horns, as though smoothing away the weight. She tells him of constellations, pointing upward through cracks where the light falls, teaching him that the sky above remembers him even when he cannot see it whole. Her voice floats between corridors like incense, clinging to the mortar, leaving traces even after she departs. The boy listens and learns not only the names of stars, but also that love can live even in narrow passages. But love does not feed him entirely. Hunger comes, not just for food, but for something unnamed. His appetite grows beyond what the kitchens bring, a gnawing emptiness that aches in his ribs and claws his throat. The guards mutter that his shadow seems larger than his body, that his breathing sounds like a storm. They carry baskets of meat now, not only bread and fruit. At first he recoils, puzzled by the rawness, then slowly, drawn by need, he accepts. The taste brands itself upon him. The labyrinth feels the change too. The air thickens with iron tang, the stones learning to echo in a darker timbre. Whispers climb up through the palace. Servants mutter of a prince hidden from the sun, a creature who devours more than his share, a half-god, half-beast whose hunger will demand sacrifice. Minos, hearing these rumours swell, begins to shape them into order. He does not silence them, he teaches them to march in step. Fear, he knows, can be polished into loyalty if paraded with proper rhythm. He speaks little, but his silence itself becomes a verdict. In his councils he listens to disputes over ships and harvests, yet his gaze drifts toward the floor, toward the hill beneath which his son paces. The labyrinth meanwhile grows to know its charge more deeply. Asterion rubs his horns against corners until the stone smooths in reply. He traces grooves with his nails, and they answer back with memory. He learns to run, hooves striking sparks where tiles give way, his breath roaring in rhythm with his stride. He does not see himself as caged. He feels the corridors expand with him, turning his motion into music. Yet at night, when the torches die and only silence remains, he curls upon the cold floor and feels loneliness press against him like a second hide. In his dreams he walks under open sky, yet always the horizon bends into walls again. Outside, Crete's festivals blaze brighter. Minos orders processions in honor of Poseidon, hoping to distract the god with spectacle. The bull leapers fly, bodies folding over the white bull's massive back, their wrists trailing ribbons of scarlet and gold. The people cheer, intoxicated by danger disguised as play, yet beneath the drum's thunder, a low murmur threads itself. What debt still lies unpaid? The sea remains patient, but does not forget, and the gods are as steady in their reckoning as the tides return. Asterion senses this unease without words. He feels it in the trembling hands that set down his meals, in the hurried footsteps of guards who fear to linger. He cannot name betrayal, but he feels its draft, cold and relentless. Moving through the corridors, he presses his ear against the walls, listening to the island itself, and hears whispers of ships, storms, oaths. He does not understand their meaning, only that something vast leans toward him, as if the labyrinth is not only his home but also his sentence. The queen dreams of him wandering fields of wheat, his horns crowned with garlands, welcomed by laughter. She wakes with wet cheeks and knows the dream is a gift she cannot give. Minos too dreams. Though his visions are sharper, he sees his throne collapsing into sand, his crown swallowed by the surf. He wakes furious, heart hammering like a drum, and his thoughts coil ever tighter around the figure in the labyrinth. For kings fear most what they cannot control, and here in the dark grows a son whose hunger answers to no command. The island holds its breath. The bees drone more loudly. The sea paws the shore with deliberate patience. The bulls in the courtyards lower their heads as if in warning. Even the labyrinth seems to stiffen, its corridors tensing like muscles before a leap. Asterion walks them, unaware that his very steps echo not just his life but the shaping of Crete's fate. Somewhere above, omens gather like storm clouds, and the first thread of sacrifice is being spun. Somewhere above, omens gather like storm clouds, and the first thread of sacrifice is being spun. The tale reaches outward now, toward Athens, whose ships ride restless at anchor, and whose king counts grief among his children. A quarrel flares between Crete and the mainland, a contest of pride and blood. Minos demands recompense, not in coin nor in treaty, but in bodies, as though the very pulse of Athens should be carried across the waves to feed what stirs beneath his palace. He speaks with the authority of a man who believes the gods endorse his cruelty, though even he feels the sting of the silence that follows each decree. Athens bends beneath the demand. 7 youths, 7 maidens, bright as spring, are chosen. Their cries break against stone walls and drift into the sea. Families weep at the harbour, and the gulls circle above as though already feasting. The ship's sails billow like pale shrouds, bearing sorrow toward Crete. Minos watches their approach with the calm of a king who has discovered how fear can be harvested. He tells himself it is necessity, not vengeance, but within his heart the line blurs, and in that blur he finds justification. Within the labyrinth, Asterion waits without knowing he waits. His hunger grows, sharpened by the scent of flesh, though he does not yet understand sacrifice. He hears new footsteps, light and hesitant, voices trembling in the dark. They do not come as his mother does, nor as the servants with their baskets. They come in clusters, holding hands, whispering prayers, their fear thick enough to taste in the air. He draws nearer, curious, his great shadow falling over them. Their screams echo into him, and he flinches, for he has never been taught to welcome terror. Yet hunger pushes him forward, and instinct rises like a tide he cannot resist. The labyrinth itself seems to guide the youths toward him, turns folding against their path, corridors tightening until the only way forward is into his presence. The stone has chosen its role, not mercy but inevitability. When the cries ring out, they do not leave the island. They sink deeper into the rock, carved as memory. Asterion feeds, and in feeding he changes. The sweetness of figs, the songs of his mother, the light in the well shafts, these retreat behind the iron tang now filling his mouth. He moans afterward, a sound of confusion as much as of satiation, and the sound spreads through the passages like thunder softened by distance. Above, Pasiphae presses her face into her hands. She senses what has occurred without being told. Her son has crossed a boundary written by gods and sharpened by men. She weeps not only for the youths lost, but for the boy within Asterion who still longs for gentleness. She knows hunger was given to him as a burden he did not choose, and she curses the sea that twisted her fate into this shape. Yet her curses are whispers against a tide that cannot be turned. Minos walks the terraces that night with pride steady in his chest. The people of Crete murmur approval, seeing in their king a man who commands not only men but destiny. Fear and obedience bloom like flowers watered with blood. Yet even he, in the quietest chamber of his mind, wonders whether the gods smile or only watch. His dreams are haunted by hooves striking marble, by eyes dark as wells, by the sound of his son calling in hunger from beneath the earth. He wakes before dawn and orders more guards, more rituals, more silence. The labyrinth grows darker with each sacrifice. Its air thickens, its walls seem to lean closer. The boy who once traced cracks with curious fingers now feels the world closing around him. Asterion's humanity, tender and bewildered, struggles against the roar swelling in his veins. When he curls to sleep, he dreams again of fields and of laughter, but when he wakes the taste of blood lingers, staining even his breath. He presses his forehead to the stone as though begging it to teach him another way. The stone remains mute, offering only its endless turns. In Athens, grief festers into anger. The families who lost their children whisper of vengeance. The young prince Theseus, hearing the wails of mothers, feels fire gather in his chest. He vows quietly, beneath the gaze of his father, that he will face the beast and end the terror. His words are not yet known beyond his chamber, but they slip into the weave of fate like a dark thread. The gods listen, weighing pride against hunger, justice against destiny. The sea continues its restless murmur, unappeased. The bulls in the courtyard stamp their hooves as though echoing a warning. The queen prays for mercy. That does not arrive, and in the labyrinth, Asterion walks in circles, haunted by voices that will not leave him, each echo another stitch in the fabric of his fate. Somewhere beyond the stone walls, a ship waits to be launched, its sails ready to catch a wind that will carry destiny across the wine-dark sea. A ship waits to be launched, its sails ready to catch a wind that will carry destiny across the wine-dark sea. In Athens, the young prince Theseus sharpens his resolve as though it were a blade hidden in his chest. The cries of the bereaved echo through the colonnades, each lament a stone placed upon his shoulders. He is no stranger to the weight of expectation, but this burden grows beyond his youth, stretching him into something larger. He listens to the tale of the creature waiting beneath Crete, half man, half bull, a devourer of innocence, and he feels his own name swelling toward legend. Yet beneath the fire of vengeance lies a softer ember, compassion for those whose children walked into the sea and never returned. Meanwhile, within the labyrinth, Asterion moves through his corridors with restless energy. He presses his horns against the walls until dust showers down, as though he hopes the stones themselves will answer his questions. He wonders why voices always come in fear, why no footsteps approach with laughter, why the scent of blood clings to him even when he licks the walls clean of it. He remembers figs crushed between his teeth, the sweetness of honey upon his tongue, his mother's hand stroking his hair. He remembers the lullabies that once floated through the light wells, but each memory feels more distant, as if swallowed by echoes of screaming and the bitter taste of sacrifice. Hunger remains his only certainty, and even that feels like a curse set in his veins. Pasiphae continues to visit when she can, though her steps grow heavier. She brings him fruits, though she knows they will not satisfy him. She speaks of stars, of gentle spirits, of bees who labor together in harmony. He listens, head tilted, eyes wide with longing, yet the growl within his belly interrupts her words. Sometimes he turns away in shame, curling his massive frame into the corner, hiding his face against the stone. She kneels beside him, weeping quietly, stroking his back as though he were still the infant she once cradled. Her love endures, but she fears it will not shield him from the destiny, pressing closer each season. Minos, in contrast, steels himself with cruelty disguised as governance. He commands that Athens renew its tribute, that more youths be chosen to appease the hunger of the labyrinth. He tells himself this is justice for the quarrel between kingdoms, a balancing of blood debts, yet in truth he uses the terror of his son as a throne upon which his authority sits. He believes fear will bind Crete together, that the dread of the beast will keep his enemies distant and his subjects obedient. Yet in quiet moments, when his guards are gone and the sea pounds against the cliffs, even he trembles at what has been birthed under his roof. The labyrinth itself grows darker in spirit. What once seemed merely a maze of stone now feels alive, its air heavy, its walls throbbing faintly with the memory of each cry. The torches flicker strangely, as though reluctant to burn. The guards who approach its mouth speak of hearing whispers that do not belong to men. They cross themselves and mutter prayers, claiming the place is a god's stomach rather than a man's construction. Yet still they bring the offerings, and still Asterion waits in the turning dark. In Athens, grief sharpens Theseus's resolve. He declares openly that he will be among the chosen youths, that he will face the beast in its lair, and end the cycle of tribute. His words are like flint against stone. Sparks fly, catching upon the hearts of his people. Some call him reckless, others heroic, but all recognize in his voice a chord of destiny. His father, King Aegeus, pleads with him to reconsider, but Theseus has already bound himself to this path. The gods themselves seem to lean closer, curious to see how pride, hunger, and courage will collide in the shadowed halls of Crete. Back on the island, Asterion dreams. In his sleep, he runs through corridors that bend into fields, walls that dissolve into golden stalks of grain. He hears voices not screaming but singing, calling his name without fear. For a brief moment, he feels whole, accepted, seen, but the dream dissolves, and he wakes with blood drying on his lips, alone again in the dark. He lifts his head, horns scraping the stone, and moans low, a sound of longing disguised as menace. Above him, the palace stirs uneasily, and across the sea a ship readies its sails, black against the horizon. The wind gathers, and fate waits like a hand about to close. The wind gathers, and fate waits like a hand about to close. Across the sea, the black-sailed vessel slides from Athens, its timbers creaking with grief and resolve. Upon its deck stand the chosen, 7 youths and 7 maidens, their faces pale as dawn frost, each step heavier than the last. Among them moves Theseus, tall, eyes steady, his silence carrying more weight than their cries. He holds himself as one already walking through memory. Though the salt wind stings him like any mortal, his fingers rest upon the hilt of a sword gifted in secrecy, not yet revealed to the company around him. He does not boast, for courage must ripen quietly before the gods. The sea embraces and resists, rocking the ship as though testing its passengers. The youths sing laments to steady their hearts, their voices thin threads against the vast horizon. Gulls circle, shrieking like spirits impatient for news. The black sails rise stark against the sky, a banner of mourning carried toward Crete. In the prow, Theseus lifts his gaze to the horizon, where a pale line hints of the island. He wonders what shape waits in its belly, what truth lies beneath the name monster. He feels destiny coiling around him, but he does not yet know its cost. On Crete, Pasiphae senses the ship before it is sighted. Her dreams grow restless. She wakes with her hands pressed against her chest, as though trying to still the storm rising within her. She walks the palace corridors by torchlight, each flame bending toward her like a confidant. She longs to descend to her son, to hold him, to remind him of figs and songs and starlight. But Minos has forbidden her visits, claiming the labyrinth must belong to Shadow alone. She knows his true truce, to sever the thread of her compassion, to let fear consume what tenderness remains in Asterion's heart. She resists in silence, whispering his true name into the night as if to anchor him against the tide of cruelty. Minos, for his part, prepares his court for the Athenians' arrival. He orders garlands hung, sacrifices made, processions rehearsed. The island must display its wealth and power, its authority sharpened by terror. Yet beneath his royal calm stirs unease. He dreams of bulls with human eyes, of corridors stretching without end, of waves climbing the palace walls. He tells no one, for kings cannot appear haunted. Still, he feels the labyrinth beneath his feet as a living presence, shifting with each breath of his son. He wonders if he has created not only a prison but a kingdom within a kingdom, ruled by hunger and shadow. Asterion feels the nearness of change, though he cannot name it. He paces more urgently, his hooves striking sparks against the stone. The air tastes different, charged, as if lightning had hidden itself in the corridors. He presses his palms against the walls, and feels them thrum faintly, as though they too anticipate. Hunger gnaws. But behind hunger pulses a deeper ache, a restlessness that no feast can quiet. He lifts his head and bellows, the sound rolling through the labyrinth like thunder in a mountain's chest. The guards at the entrance shudder, crossing themselves, muttering that the beast grows impatient. Night folds around the sailing vessel, and stars scatter across the water. Theseus lies awake upon the deck, listening to the waves slap the hull. He thinks of his father's tears, of the mothers who clung to their children at the harbour, of the promise he made in secret to end the tribute. His hand brushes the hilt of the sword, and he whispers a prayer to Poseidon, though uncertain whether the god will answer. The sea replies only with its eternal murmur, neither blessing nor denial. Still, he feels the path before him like a drawn bowstring, taut and unyielding. At dawn, Crete rises from the horizon, a mountain crowned with palaces, its harbours gleaming like bronze mirrors. Trumpets sound from the shore, announcing both welcome and doom. The Athenians step onto the dock, their bodies trembling beneath their composure. Minos greets them with the smile of a ruler who masks steel with ceremony. He speaks of duty, of justice, of order, while the people of Crete watch in silence, their eyes reflecting both awe and pity. Behind the spectacle, Pasiphae hides her sorrow. knowing that among these youths walks the one who may end her son's life, or be ended by him. That evening, as feasts are laid in the palace, Asterion prowls his dark halls. He senses footsteps he has not yet heard, voices he has not yet tasted in the air. He pauses by a light well, gazing upward at the square of sky now bruised with twilight. For a fleeting instant he imagines someone calling his name without fear. Then the vision dissolves, and only hunger remains. He lowers his head, and the labyrinth seems to close around him more tightly, guarding him like a secret soon to be unveiled. The stars shift above, and destiny draws nearer, quiet as a hand setting down a thread. Destiny draws nearer, quiet as a hand setting down a thread. In the palace courts, torches lean like reeds, while musicians test strings as if night required tuning. Minos receives the Athenians with measured splendor, a smile polished to reflect only what he wishes seen. The youths move like pale flames. Their eyes are moon pools that have memorized weeping. Among the Theseus stands as a stillness at the center of noise, his resolve sheathed. He drinks the island with a cautious gaze, the way a man reads a law before he signs it. Ariadne watches from a balcony where vines curl like green handwriting. When the music swells, she hears beneath it a deeper drum from below. The labyrinth's breath climbs through the floors, touching her wrists with cool, invisible fingers. Asterion's low moan threads the night. It is hunger, and it is homesickness for a world he has never known. Hearing it, a secret pity opens in her, the kind that looks like treason from a throne. Later, when the courtyards have emptied and the moon stands like a priestess, the princess seeks the builder. He lives among tools and drafts, listening to chalk and plumb as if they were elders. She asks not for murder, but for a path back from darkness. Not for a weapon, but a way to remember the way. The builder, whose cleverness has learned the loneliness of corridors, places in her hands a skein wound soft as a sigh. Thread, he says without saying, is a road you carry inside your fist. Ariadne weighs the skein. Its pull is feather-light and yet heavier than iron. She feels how a single line, faithfully tended, can argue against confusion. She imagines leading a stranger into the dark and leading him back again, and also that the line might be a bridge between one heart and another. She stands at the window watching torches gutter, and hears from below a second moan, as if the labyrinth wished to be unknotted. In the morning, Minos parades the white bull. The people shout to bless their own shivering. Theseus walks among the garlanded pillars, like a question no one has decided how to answer. When Ariadne meets him by chance or by a god's conspiracy, she sees not a slayer only, but a youth who carries grief like a seal ring. She speaks in the language of hospitality, while her hands, hidden in her sleeves, measure the spool. She thinks of mothers on Athenian docks, and of another mother whose lullabies are trapped below. Beneath them, Asterion wakes to perfumes of a festival he cannot attend. He tastes cinnamon, roasted meat, crushed mint, and the iron memory that will not leave his mouth. He remembers figs and the slow music of his mother's voice. He remembers bees that make a city out of hunger. A bee strays down a light well. He follows its hum until sun swallows it and the brightness stings. He lowers his head not in rage, but in shame that he does not know how to be gentle when the air brings fear to his door. The guards whisper as they escort the Athenians to shuttered rooms. Fear travels faster than procession. It flows before them like wind through wheat. Ariadne moves through that wind as if parting a curtain. She carries bread and fruit as pretext, the skein veiled in linen. When she speaks with Theseus, she does not offer triumph. She offers attention, a listening that returns a person to himself. She tells him without telling him how threads behave in the dark, how a single kindness can keep a hand from opening, how patience can be tied to stone. Night again. The island tilts toward its dreaming. Pasiphae stands at a balustrade and feels the draught from the hill cool her face. Her hands know the weight of a newborn, the weight of a loaf, the weight of a fate she cannot lift. She prays in the ordinary voice she once used for rain and bread. She asks now that whatever happens below should not erase the boy hidden inside the word others use for convenience. Minos walks alone after the feast, counting steps. He hears the sea pushing its ledger up the shore, and faint, patient knocking of the labyrinth, as if his palace were a portal that something beneath keeps trying to open. He orders torches added, as if light could discipline truth. He orders more silence, as if quiet could tame what is. Theseus lies awake on woven mats. He fingers the knot Ariadne taught him, feeling how a loop answers a pull, if asked kindly. He imagines corridors like ribs curving around a heart. He does not picture a monster's face. He imagines eyes reflecting lamplight. He promises no god listening, only the dark, that if there is a way to end the killings without erasing what breathes, he will try to find it. Down below, the labyrinth rehearses silence. Asterion walks his learned routes. He dreads the smell of fear, because it always brings him to the same terrible door within. And yet without it, hunger howls. He rubs his horns against the stone until powder coats him like milk. He lays his cheek to the floor, listening for footsteps he will not have to chase. He dreams of hands that do not flinch, of being named gently, and the name staying. A gull cries from the parapet, dawn slides a silver blade between night and day. The thread lies coiled, patient as law. Above, a young man steadies his breath. Below, a young creature steadies his. Between them a maze waits, neither merciful nor cruel, only exact. The first step will be taken when the sun lifts one finger over the eastern hills, and from that finger a line will unroll, seeking shape in the dark. The first step will be taken when the sun lifts one finger over the eastern hills, and from that finger a line will unroll, seeking shape in the dark. Dawn spreads slowly across the island, brushing the terraces with gold, gilding olive leaves until they shine like coins pressed from the breath of gods. The people of Crete gather, hushed along the streets, their eyes turned toward the palace gates where the Athenian youths are led. Their sandals strike the stones in careful rhythm, and each sound is answered by a silence deeper than fear, for all know where the procession bends. Theseus walks among them, shoulders straight, gaze calm. In his sleeve, unseen, the thread coils soft as promise. Ariadne watches from a colonnade, her hands clasped tightly, knuckles pale with devotion. She has given him more than thread. She has given him the echo of her own heartbeat to carry into the dark. The builder, standing apart, leans upon his staff, eyes lowered, yet within his chest he feels the old ache of fathers who know too well what their cleverness has wrought. Beneath their feet, the labyrinth stirs. Asterion senses movement above, footsteps gathering at his door. His breath deepens, nostrils wide, tasting the air for what approaches. The scent of fear rides first, sharp and thin, mingled with salt from the sea, yet beneath it flows another note, steadier, unfamiliar. Courage. He lifts his head, puzzled, as if listening to a song whose refrain he has never heard. Hunger still claws him, but with it rises curiosity, a pull not of instinct but of recognition. Something comes that is not like the others. The Athenians are led down the sloping passage, torches carried by guards who avert their eyes. The flames shiver against damp stone, shadows leap as though alive. The air cools, heavy with limestone and memory. Every step a descent into another world. At the threshold, the guards retreat, their duty fulfilled, leaving the youths huddled together. Some weep quietly, others cling to one another, their prayers rising like smoke into the unseen heights. Theseus steps forward, the coil of thread tied firm at the entrance, its slender path leading back to light. His hand rests on the hilt of his sword, but his breath is slow, steady, a rhythm meant to calm not only himself but those who follow his lead. The labyrinth closes around them, swallowing sound. The first turn is gentle, almost welcoming, but soon walls press tighter, corridors fold into one another, and the path becomes a tangle of echoes. The thread unspools with each careful step, whispering along the floor like a guiding spirit. Theseus moves at the front, eyes keen, ears attuned to the faintest sound. Behind him the others falter, whispering his name as though it were a charm against the dark. Deep within, Asterion hears them. His heart beats faster, hooves scraping against stone as he shifts his weight. He does not rush. He circles slowly, listening, letting the echoes lead him. He remembers other footsteps, other cries, the taste that lingered after each. Yet something is different. The air carries not only fear but resolve, and it draws him like water draws the thirsty. He lowers his head, not in rage but in wonder, and begins to move toward them. Above, in the palace, Minos watches the horizon from a high balcony. His eyes are fixed not on the sky but on the sea, as though searching for the god who once sent him the white bull. He tells himself this day will prove his authority again, that Athens will bow in grief once more. Yet beneath his calm mask, unease coils like a serpent. He knows destiny rarely repeats itself without adding a sharper edge. Pasiphae kneels in her chamber, whispering Asterion's name into her hands. She imagines him wandering alone, pressed between hunger and sorrow, misunderstood by every mouth that speaks of him. She does not pray for victory nor defeat, only that he might be remembered as more than his hunger, more than the fear others have sown around him. She presses her forehead to the floor, her tears darkening the tiles, and the gods listen though they do not answer. The corridors narrow, the Athenians tremble, but Theseus does not falter. The spool diminishes in his hand, each length of thread tying him more tightly to fate. He feels the labyrinth breathing, the air thickening, the sound of hooves reverberating from the stone. He raises his sword slowly, careful not to let it ring against the walls. The others press back, clutching each other, eyes wide in terror. Yet Theseus steps forward into the sound, his body calm, his mind sharpened. And Asterion, turning the last corner, sees him. Two figures pause in the half-light, man and creature, each staring into the other, as though into a mirror that has been hidden until now. Neither moves, for both understand in some wordless depth that the world holds its breath upon their meeting. Hunger trembles against courage, sorrow against resolve, and between them the labyrinth waits, silent, exact, ready to remember everything. The labyrinth waits, silent, exact, ready to remember everything. For a moment the world narrows to two beings standing in half-light, a prince whose heart burns with justice, and a creature whose very breath is woven of sorrow. Theseus steadies his stance, hand firm upon his sword, yet his eyes are not cruel. He studies the figure before him, the wide chest rising and falling, the curved horns gleaming faintly, the eyes dark as wells that have swallowed too many reflections. He sees not only a monster, but a being heavy with solitude. Asterion tilts his head, nostrils flaring as he tastes the stranger's scent. It is not like the others, sharp and frantic, spilling terror like spilled wine. This one carries calm, a steadiness that confuses his hunger. He steps forward slowly, hooves ringing faintly against stone. His gaze fixes upon the thread trailing from Theseus's hand, gleaming faintly in the torchlight. Something about it feels different. Not a trap, not a chain, but a promise of return. His breath huffs, a sound that might be mistaken for menace, but is closer to yearning. Behind Theseus, the Athenian youths clutch each other, their whispers darting like frightened birds. They beg him not to move closer, yet he lifts his hand gently, silencing them with calm. He does not rush forward. He waits, letting the creature approach at its own pace. The labyrinth hums around them, the walls drinking in the moment, aware that something more than violence hovers in the air. From above, faint echoes of festival drums seep downward, though dulled, as though the island itself does not wish to intrude. Ariadne, pacing her chamber, feels the thread tug in her thoughts. Though she holds no spool, she presses her hands to her breast. whispering that the gods must grant gentleness, even in a place built for cruelty. Pasiphae too feels her heart twist, sensing across stone and silence that her son is no longer wandering alone, but standing at the edge of a meeting that will define him. Asterion lowers his head, horns catching the dim flame, and lets out a low bellow. It rolls through the labyrinth, not the roar of rage, but the voice of a question. Theseus answers not with words, but by lowering his blade slightly, showing he has come not only as slayer, but as seeker. The gesture does not go unnoticed. The labyrinth itself seems to pause, its drafts holding still, as though waiting to see whether destiny might bend differently than before. Hunger gnaws at Asterion, sharp as ever. His body aches with it. His mouth waters with the memory of flesh. Yet another pull rises, stranger, softer, the pull of recognition of not being utterly alone. His great hands twitch at his sides, uncertain whether to strike or to reach. He moans again, this time softer, a sound like grief folded into breath. Theseus hears it and feels the weight of his vow deepen. He knows this encounter is no simple test of strength, but a confrontation with the nature of fate itself. The youths behind him shift restlessly, fear clawing at their composure. They cannot read the silence, cannot bear the slowness of the moment. One stifles a sob, and the sound shatters the fragile balance. Asterion startles, his eyes widening, hunger rising to drown confusion. He lunges forward, half in instinct, half in desperation, and the labyrinth erupts with sound, hooves pounding, cries rising, the clash of breath against stone. Theseus meets him, sword raised now not in hesitation but necessity. Steel flashes, sparks leap where blade meets horn, and the sound is like thunder trapped in a cavern. Asterion roars, the sound reverberating through the maze until even the stones seem to tremble. The Athenians scatter behind their protector, the thread of hope coiling tighter around Theseus's grip. Yet even in the clash, a strange intimacy binds them. Each sees in the other what the world has demanded they become. One forced into the shape of savior, the other into the shape of monster. Their struggle is not only of bodies but of destinies colliding. Each strike and parry a conversation older than both of them. Sweat beads on Theseus's brow, blood beads where horn grazes his arm. Asterion's chest heaves, his eyes flashing with pain, hunger and something that feels like sorrow too deep for words. Above, Minos listens for news, his face still and proud, yet deep within he wonders if perhaps the silence that follows will not be the silence he expects. Pasiphae weeps into her hands, her prayers rising like smoke. Ariadne clutches her spool, whispering into the thread itself as if it can carry her voice into the dark. Below, the clash continues. Sword arcs like lightning, horns sweep like storms, and the labyrinth keeps its promise to remember. The dust rises, the echoes lengthen, and in the space between one heartbeat and the next, the island itself seems to hold its breath, waiting to see which name the future will speak. The island itself seems to hold its breath, waiting to see which name the future will speak. In the half-light of the labyrinth, Asterion and Theseus circle, their shadows weaving together like opposing verses in the same hymn. Dust rises where hooves strike stone, and the thread whispers against the floor with each shift of the prince's stance. The air is thick with heat, with the iron of blood, with the echoes of cries swallowed by the walls long ago. Yet within that density exists an intimacy, as if the corridor itself bends to cradle this encounter, knowing it is more than struggle, it is judgment written in flesh. Asterion lowers his head, horns sharp crescents glinting with torchlight. His body moves not with malice alone, but with a lifetime of hunger and exile, condensed into each stride. Theseus watches closely, seeing in the creature not mindless fury, but deliberate will. He adjusts, letting the labyrinth's rhythm guide his own, stepping where the stone suggests, breathing in time with the silence between bellows. Their battle becomes less like chaos and more like a dance, violent but measured, sorrowful but inexorable. The youths huddle behind, pressed into the curve of a wall. Their whispers tangle with sobs, prayers muttered in trembling voices. They glimpse only fragments, flash of steel, sweep of horn, sparks leaping in the dark. They cannot understand the strange dignity of the duel. To them it is terror personified, their lives hanging upon each heartbeat of the combat. Yet even they sense that what unfolds is not only for their deliverance, but for the island itself. For something ancient that demanded this meeting long before they were born. Asterion lunges, horn clashing against stone as Theseus sidesteps. The blow shudders through the corridor, cracks spidering faintly across the wall. Pain jolts through the creature's skull, and he reels back, bellowing. It is not rage alone, but a cry of confusion, as if asking the world why it cast him into a shape both feared and despised. Theseus steadies his blade, but does not strike immediately. He hesitates, reading the sorrow in those dark eyes, and for a heartbeat wonders whether mercy is possible. Yet hunger surges again in Asterion, overpowering the fleeting tenderness. His great hands lash forward, claws raking sparks. Theseus raises his sword, steel singing as it cuts through air. Their collision is thunder, and the labyrinth swallows it whole, carrying the sound through every corridor until even the stones seem to hum with the resonance. Above, Ariadne presses her ear to the floor of her chamber, as though listening might weave her spirit into the thread she gave. She whispers his name, Theseus, and also another, Asterion, for she cannot deny the creature's humanity that she has glimpsed in her mother's sorrow. Pasiphae, kneeling in her chamber, does the same, though her voice breaks with grief. She feels each clash as though her own bones absorbed the strikes, as though the child she birthed still cried within her arms. Minos, standing alone on a high terrace, pretends to watch the stars, yet his mind is fixed below, counting the silence between echoes. He tells himself victory will come, that Athens will be punished anew, that his throne will be steadied by dread, but in his chest coils a quieter fear that the labyrinth may finally return what he tried to bury, not in body, but in truth. Within the maze, sweat runs down Theseus's face, salt stinging his eyes. His breath comes in measured gasps, but his will does not falter. He moves again, blade carving arcs of silver in the dark. Asterion charges, but this time the prince meets him with precision, stepping aside just enough to let strength become weakness. Steel bites flesh, a shallow cut along the creature's flank. Blood splashes the stones, steaming in the torch's glow. Asterion staggers, his bellow echoing, deeper now, filled with pain that is both physical and soul-born. For an instant, silence reigns. Theseus lowers his blade slightly, gazing at the wounded creature. He sees a boy, curled in the corner of the labyrinth, ashamed of his hunger, longing for figs and honey, yearning for a name spoken kindly. The vision grips him, and his heart trembles, but the sound of the Athenians behind him, their sobbing prayers, pulls him back. He remembers his vow, remembers the black sails, remembers the mother's cries. His grip tightens once more. Asterion licks blood from his arm, panting. His eyes meet the prince's, and for a flicker of a moment there is understanding. Two beings trapped in roles carved by forces beyond themselves. Then hunger roars again, and he charges once more. The labyrinth braces, the thread stretches, and destiny gathers its breath, readying for the strike yet to come. The labyrinth braces, the thread stretches, and destiny gathers its breath, readying for the strike yet to come. Asterion charges once more, his hooves hammering stone, his horns lowered like crescents of moon sharpened to silver. Theseus meets him head-on, body braced, sword raised in the narrow corridor where retreat is impossible. The clash is thunder trapped in stone. Sparks leap from the blade, and dust rains from the ceiling. For a heartbeat it seems the walls themselves will split open, unable to contain the violence pressed between them. Asterion reels back, shaking his great head, blood streaking his flank. He bellows, the sound rolling through every turn, carrying grief as much as fury. His chest heaves, not only with exhaustion, but with a deeper torment, the weight of years spent in darkness, the burden of hunger mistaken for nature rather than curse. His eyes meet Theseus's again, and in them flickers not rage alone, but the question that has haunted him since birth. Why must he be shaped as the terror others fear? Theseus steadies his breath, sweat stinging his eyes, his arm aching from the force of each collision. Yet he does not falter. He sees the creature's suffering, but he also hears the soft whimpers of the youths huddled behind him, their fear trembling like strings plucked by unseen hands. Their lives press against his vow, urging him onward. He must choose not only for himself, but for them, for Athens, for every mother who cast her eyes toward the sea and found only absence in return. His grip tightens, his resolve hardens, though sorrow pools in his chest. The labyrinth grows heavier with silence between each clash. The torches flicker uncertainly, as though even fire fears to choose a side. The thread drags along the floor, patient, marking the path of return, but the way forward coils around them in endless loops. The air smells of sweat, blood, and ancient stone, a mixture that seems to carry all the weight of history itself. Asterion lunges again, arms sweeping wide, claws scraping sparks from the wall. Theseus ducks, blade flashing upward. This time steel bites deep into the shoulder, cutting muscle, driving a roar from the creature that shakes the corridors. Asterion staggers, his knees buckling, his body pressed suddenly against the wall. The sound he makes is not rage, but anguish, a moan that sinks into the stones like a confession. He does not fall, but his strength wavers, and in that weakness a new kind of silence blooms. Above, Ariadne trembles, fingers tangled in her hair. She feels the thread's tension, though she does not hold it. She whispers prayers both to gods and to unnamed powers, asking that the darkness below might allow some measure of mercy. Pasiphae kneels, her forehead pressed to the floor, whispering her son's true name. She begs the gods not for his victory, but for his dignity, that he not be remembered as beast alone, but as the boy she once held in her arms. Minos stands rigid on the terrace, watching the stars without seeing them. Each echo from below coils around his heart. He tells himself this is justice, that Athens must bleed, that the creature is nothing but divine punishment housed in mortal flesh. Yet in the deepest chamber of his mind, unspoken, he knows he is listening not for victory, but for finality, for the labyrinth to close its account at last. Below, Theseus advances, cautious, his sword dripping red. Asterion, wounded and weary, lifts his head once more. His eyes glisten, catching the torchlight, and for a brief instant they are not monstrous, but childlike, filled with confusion and longing. He breathes heavily, each exhale a rumble that shakes the floor, each inhale a plea for release. He lowers his head again, though slower now, and steps forward as though torn between attack and surrender. Theseus steadies himself, sorrow tightening his throat. He knows the moment is near, when hesitation will mean death, when mercy may doom not only him but those behind him. Yet still he pauses, caught between the roles of slayer and savior. His eyes search the creature's face, wondering if there is a path neither sword nor hunger need take. The labyrinth leans closer, its silence taut as a bowstring, as if it too waits to see whether fate can be rewritten. Asterion bellows once more, a cry that reverberates like grief carried through centuries. He charges, wounded yet unstoppable, body driven by hunger, instinct and despair. Theseus raises his blade, bracing for the inevitable. The youths cry out behind him, their voices mingling with the roar, and the labyrinth becomes a chamber of sound and shadow. The thread stretches farther into the dark, trembling softly, as if alive, holding to its promise of return, while the clash of destiny draws nearer to its breaking point. The thread stretches farther into the dark, trembling softly as if alive, holding to its promise of return, while the clash of destiny draws nearer to its breaking point. Asterion charges again, horns cutting arcs of shadow against the wavering torchlight. Theseus meets him with steel, the impact ringing through the corridor like the strike of a great bell. Sparks scatter, dust clouds swell, and the labyrinth itself seems to convulse, as though weary of containing the struggle born within its walls. The prince's blade carves another line across the creature's flesh. Shallow but sure, Asterion staggers. Yet he does not collapse. His body, born of God's wrath and woman's sorrow, is resilient beyond mortal reckoning. Blood trails dark down his side, but in his eyes a different flame burns, one not of hunger alone, but of desperate recognition. He lunges again, and his roar is more than fury. It is a plea for the world to understand that he is more than his curse. Theseus hears that plea even as his sword lifts once more. His heart quakes at it, for he sees in those dark eyes a reflection of loneliness too vast for a labyrinth to contain. Yet behind him the voices of the Athenian youths tremble, their fear reminding him of why he came. Duty chains his arm even as compassion softens it. Each strike he makes feels less like triumph and more like sorrow written in muscle and breath. Asterion falters, sinking briefly to one knee. His great chest heaves, pulling air as if each inhale must be wrestled from the world. He steadies himself with one massive hand against the stone, leaving a print of blood upon the wall. For a moment he bows his head, horns lowered not in attack, but in weariness, as if admitting that his strength, once endless, has limits. In that bow lies something almost human, a gesture of exhaustion, of surrender, or perhaps of unspoken prayer. Theseus watches, sword raised but motionless. He could strike then, end it with one sure thrust. Yet he hesitates, caught between the command of justice and the pull of pity. He wonders whether the gods who shaped this creature ever considered the torment they imposed, or whether cruelty to mortals is to them only another form of spectacle. His breath trembles, his resolve flickers, but the cries behind him harden his stance once more. Asterion lifts his head slowly. His gaze meeting the prince's, in his eyes glimmers a memory. The figs his mother once placed in his hand, the sound of her lullabies echoing through the light wells, the brief warmth of a touch that did not recoil. He takes one step forward, unsteady, bleeding, yet unbroken in spirit. He moans low, a sound that rolls like thunder softened by sorrow. For Theseus it is no longer the cry of a beast, but the voice of a boy whose name has been lost in shadow. Above, Ariadne presses the spool to her lips as though her breath might travel along the thread. She prays not only for Theseus's safety but for her brother's dignity. Pasiphae does the same, her tears falling into her lap, whispering Asterion's true name into the silence. Minos alone does not pray. He stands rigid at his terrace, his jaw locked, unwilling to admit that what stirs below is not merely his victory but the unravelling of his reign's most terrible secret. The labyrinth grows still, listening. Even the bats cling silently to the stone, as if the very creatures of the dark await the verdict of this encounter. The air thickens, charged with the weight of decision. Theseus raises his sword again, this time with both hands, steadying his heart as much as his grip. Asterion straightens, gathering what remains of his strength, horns gleaming faintly in the wavering torchlight. Two figures face one another, each shaped by forces older and larger than themselves. Then, with a final cry that is equal parts fury and lament, Asterion surges forward once more. The prince answers, his sword thrusting into the arc of that charge, steel meeting flesh in a strike that echoes through every corner of the maze. The Thora that follows shakes the stone, reverberating like a storm trapped within the earth. Blood splatters the walls, the thread trembles violently, and the labyrinth remembers. When the echo fades, silence falls heavy. The Athenians behind Theseus do not move, barely daring to breathe. Above, Ariadne clutches the spool until her knuckles whiten. her heart poised on the edge of hope and grief. Pasiphae collapses forward, whispering her son's name once more, her voice a thread of sorrow carried into the night. Minos turns his gaze from the stars, though whether in triumph or dread, none can say. And in the darkness below, amid blood, stone and silence, the struggle pauses, not yet ended, suspended between death and the faintest chance of something else. Amid blood, stone and silence, the struggle pauses, suspended between death and the faintest chance of something else. Theseus holds his sword buried in the flesh of his foe, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with the weight of what he has done. Asterion shudders, the breath rattling in his throat, his great hands clutching at the blade, as though it were not an enemy's weapon, but some strange key lodged within him. He groans low, the sound reverberating like a funeral hymn through the corridors. The labyrinth, listening, draws in the sound and keeps it, adding it to the countless echoes that already haunt its turning halls. Yet he does not fall. The wound bleeds, but life surges stubbornly within him. His eyes meet the prince's dark, glistening, wounded eyes, and in them lies no simple beast's fury. There is anguish, recognition, and something like release, as though part of him has longed for this very end, while another part clings desperately to the possibility of being seen. Theseus, trembling, hesitates. His hand grips the sword but does not twist. Compassion falters against necessity. Behind him the Athenian youths murmur in fear, urging him to finish it. Their voices, thin with terror, remind him of his vow, of the families waiting by the sea, of the sails that carried them here in mourning. He steels himself again, his jaw set, but his heart aches with the knowledge that he is striking not only a creature but a life that has known only exile and hunger. Asterion sways, pressing his hand to the stone as though seeking comfort from the walls that have been both his cradle and his cage. His breath comes ragged, each exhale fogging the air like smoke. He lifts his head slowly, horns tilting, and in that motion there is a strange dignity, as if he refuses to collapse in disgrace. He moans again, softer this time, and the sound carries the memory of figs, of lullabies, of sunlight glimpsed through narrow wells. It is a sound that belongs more to a boy than to a beast. Above, Ariadne feels the vibration through the floor. She grips the spool, whispering through clenched teeth, her prayers tangled between love for the stranger she aided and sorrow for the brother she could not save. Pasiphae sobs openly, her cries echoing against the cold marble of her chamber. She feels in her bones the wound inflicted upon her son, as though the blade had pierced her own flesh. Minos alone stands unmoved upon his terrace, though inside him silence coils tight, pressing against the fortress of his pride. Theseus withdraws the sword, the sound wet and final. Asterion staggers backward, clutching the wound. Blood drips, pattering onto the stones like rain on a tomb. For a moment he seems about to collapse, but instead he straightens, towering once more, his chest expanding with one last great breath. He locks eyes with the prince again, and in that gaze lies a strange communion. Two figures bound by fate, each carrying a burden not entirely their own. Then, with a roar that shakes the labyrinth to its foundations, Asterion charges one final time. Theseus braces, sword angled, body steady, though his soul quivers at the enormity of this ending. The impact is colossal. Steel drives deep, horn grazes flesh, and the two lock together in a violent embrace that is as much ritual as it is battle. Asterion shudders, his strength collapsing, his hands slipping from the prince's shoulders. Blood floods his lips, and he exhales with a sigh that sounds eerily like relief. His body sinks, lowering onto the stone, the torchlight flickering across his horns one last time. Silence follows, heavier than any roar. The labyrinth listens, waiting, then sighs as though releasing the weight it has borne for so long. Dust settles, and the thread trembles once more, now slack, as if it too knew the outcome. The youths behind weep softly, their terror ebbing into stunned quiet. Theseus stands over the fallen figure, chest heaving, sword red, his face a mask of both triumph and grief. He has ended the terror, but he feels no triumphal flame, only the solemnity of a duty fulfilled. Asterion lies still, yet even in death there is dignity. His horns gleam, his massive frame softened by stillness, and in his face remains a shadow of the boy who once curled in corners, listening to his mother's songs. Theseus gazes upon him for a long moment, silently acknowledging that this was no mere beast, but a soul burdened with the form of a curse. He whispers something inaudible, a farewell perhaps, then turns at last toward the others, gesturing for them to follow the thread. Above, Ariadne feels the spool grow lighter in her hands, and tears slip down her cheeks. Pasiphae presses her hands over her heart, whispering her son's name until her voice fades into sobs. Minos stares into the night, jaw set, unwilling to name the hollow that opens within him. And within the labyrinth, the echo of that final roar lingers, etched into stone as if the maze itself will never forget. The prince begins to lead the youths outward, the thread gleaming faintly, promising the way back. Yet behind them the silence deepens, as though the darkness itself mourns. The silence deepens, as though the darkness itself mourns. Theseus lowers his sword at last, the weight of it pressing against his arm like a burden rather than a weapon. Around him, the Athenians stir hesitantly, their sobs softening into gasps of relief. They look upon the fallen figure with wide eyes, some still trembling, others whispering thanks to gods who may or may not have guided them. Yet none step closer. The body of the Minotaur lies too large, too solemn, too sacred in its ruin, to be approached with anything but reverence and fear. Theseus remains still for a moment longer, his gaze fixed on the horns that catch the faint light, curving like crescents of a broken moon. He whispers again, words lost to the maze, but his tone is one of acknowledgement. He knows he has not slain an empty shadow, but a being who carried the burden of both man and beast. A tragedy carved into flesh. He feels the thread tug lightly in his hand, reminding him of the path back, and only then does he turn, gesturing for the others to follow. The spool winds slowly as they move, the line whispering across the floor, guiding them back toward air and light. Each step seems longer than the last, for the labyrinth resists letting them go, its silence heavy with memory. The youths cling to one another, their footsteps hesitant, as though fearing the maze may yet change its mind. But Theseus leads firmly, his eyes fixed forward, unwilling to falter now that the deed is done. Above, Ariadne feels the pull of the thread slacken. She presses the spool to her lips, her heart pounding as though she has lived every moment of the struggle through its invisible cord. She knows from the silence that the end has come, yet her relief mingles with grief. She has given Theseus the means to live, but she has also guided her brother to death. She weeps silently, her tears falling upon the spool, each drop vanishing into the fibres as if returning to the labyrinth itself. Pasiphae collapses beside her altar, the prayer half formed upon her lips dissolving into sobs. She rocks gently, whispering Asterion's true name again and again, as though repetition could stitch him back into existence. She imagines him not as the monster the world feared, but as the infant she once held, the boy who reached for figs, the youth who lingered by the shafts of light. In her grief she feels the cruelty not only of fate, but of the gods who made of her love a punishment.
Minos stands apart, his face hard as the marble of his palace. He learns from the silence what has occurred, yet he does not voice it. His pride forbids mourning aloud, but in his chest coils unease. He knows that with Asterion's death, something more than a creature has been lost. The labyrinth itself feels altered, as though it too has breathed out a long sigh, no longer bound by the life it once held. He looks toward the horizon, jaw clenched, unwilling to admit the fragility of the order he has built.
Below, the Athenians emerge into air at last, The guards stationed by the entrance recoil in astonishment, for never before has anyone returned. Theseus steps into the torchlight, the youths huddled close behind him, and in his hand the sword gleams faintly with the shadow of what it has done. The guards whisper, unsure whether to strike or bow, for they see in his eyes the calm fire of one who has touched destiny. Ariadne rushes to meet him, her hands trembling as she takes hold of the slackened thread. She searches his face for certainty, and in his silence she finds her answer. The island quivers with rumour before the words are even spoken. Servants murmur, courtiers pale, and priests look to their altars with unease. The tale moves quickly, carried on the trembling of voices. The Minotaur is dead, the labyrinth undone in spirit. The tribute of Athens ended. Some rejoice quietly, some mourn, some fear the wrath of Minos when the news fully hardens in his mind. All know that Crete will never again be the same. Yet in the depths of the labyrinths, silence lingers. The stones remember the final roar, the blood that stained them, the breath that once filled their hollows. The corridors lie empty, but they do not forget. Asterion's presence clings faintly still, as though his spirit walks the turns not as hunger but as echo. Those who pass near the labyrinth in the nights to come will swear they hear a low moan rising from its belly, not furious but mournful, like the sigh of one who wanted to be more than his fate allowed. Theseus looks once more toward the dark entrance before turning away. He knows that what he has done will live in songs and tales, but for him it is not victory, it is the closing of a life heavy with sorrow. He breathes deeply, steadying his heart, and clasps Ariadne's hand. The youths gather around them, blinking in the sudden freedom of air, uncertain how to carry the weight of their deliverance. The moon rises over Crete, silvering the palace roofs, while the labyrinth beneath grows still, its hunger ended. Yet in the stillness remains a shadow, a memory that will not leave easily, whispering that even in death, Astarion is not gone, but folded into the very fabric of the island's soul. The labyrinth beneath grows still, its hunger ended, yet stillness is never empty. It carries echoes, impressions pressed into stone like seals into wax. Those who dare stand near its mouth in the nights that follow whisper of a low moan that rises from the depths, not furious but grieving, as though the very walls lament the loss of the life they once cradled. The people of Crete avoid the place, crossing themselves with small gestures, leaving offerings at a distance as though the spirit of the Minotaur lingers, not wholly banished but transformed into shadow and memory. In the palace, silence spreads as swiftly as rumour. Servants move softly, their footsteps hushed, their voices clipped. They have lived so long in the shadow of fear that its sudden removal feels unnatural. Like the absence of wind after a storm, Minos summons his council, but speaks little, his commands sharp and few. He knows his authority has been shaken, though none dare say it aloud. The labyrinth was both his terror and his throne, the creature within both curse and symbol of power. Now, with Asterion gone, a crack has opened in his dominion, a wound no proclamation can close. Pasiphae remains in her chamber, shrouded in grief. She does not rail against the gods, nor accuse her husband, nor curse the Athenians who brought this end. Instead, she cradles silence as if it were her only child left to her. She remembers the weight of Asterion's infant body in her arms, the soft warmth of his cheek against her breast, the sound of his first cries. She remembers too the sorrow in his eyes as he grew, the confusion, the yearning he could not voice. Her heart breaks not because he is gone, but because he lived so long unseen, named only by his hunger and his horns. Ariadne paces the colonnades at night, her hands restless, her thoughts heavy. She has saved Theseus, and she has freed Athens, but she feels the paradox of her gift. By giving the thread, she has woven her brother's death. She dreams of Asterion wandering the maze still, calling her name softly, not as a monster, but as the brother who once reached for her when they were children. She wakes with tears on her cheeks, uncertain whether her devotion has betrayed her blood. She clings to Theseus, hoping that in his strength she might find a reason for what she has done. Theseus himself does not boast of his deed. He carries it with the solemn weight of one who knows that victory is never clean. He has slain the terror of Athens, but in his heart he carries the image of a face filled with anguish, of a cry that was more lament than fury. He does not speak of it to his companions, for their joy is too fragile to bear the weight of his sorrow. Instead, he leads them quietly, guiding them toward the shore where the ship waits, black sails ready to bear them away. The people of Crete gather at the harbour, watching silently as the Athenians prepare to depart. Some are relieved, others fearful of what Minos may decree, but all know they have witnessed the ending of an age. Children clutch their mothers' skirts, asking questions in whispers, questions no one can answer. Old men mutter that the gods have shifted their gaze, that the labyrinth will never sleep again. Women scatter petals into the sea, unsure whether to honour the dead or ward off his ghost. Minos alone stands unyielding, his face a mask carved from stone. He watches the ship with its cargo of the living, his jaw tight, his eyes narrowed. He does not speak Asterion's name, does not admit that the loss is personal, does not confess the fear that coils within him. Yet, in his silence lies acknowledgement. He knows that without the labyrinth's prisoner, his rule stands bare, no longer shrouded in the dread that once cloaked it. He turns from the shore, his cloak whipping in the wind, and the people see not strength, but retreat. As the ship unfurls its sails, Ariadne stands beside Theseus, her face pale in the salt breeze. She clutches his arm, torn between hope and grief. She has chosen him, yet her heart aches for the brother left behind. Theseus feels her trembling and covers her hand with his own, but he cannot still the storm that churns within her. She gazes back toward the palace one last time, seeing in her mind the empty corridors, the silence that now reigns where once heavy footsteps echoed. Night falls, and the ship glides away, carrying its passengers into the wide embrace of the sea. Behind them, Crete grows smaller, its cliffs dark against the moonlit horizon. Yet the labyrinth remains, an empty cradle that still hums with memory. Some say that in the quietest hours, when the wind drops and the sea holds its breath, a faint sound rises from beneath the island, the sigh of Asterion, neither beast nor god, but a soul caught forever between. And as the vessel cuts through the waves, Theseus stands at its prow, eyes fixed forward, yet his thoughts wander backward into shadow, where the Minotaur's final gaze lingers, a reminder that victory is never without sorrow, and that even monsters carry the weight of broken dreams. Theseus stands at the prow, eyes fixed forward, yet his thoughts wander backward into shadow, where the Minotaur's final gaze lingers. The sea sprays his face, cool and briny, carrying away the dust of Crete, but not the weight of memory. Behind him, the youth sleep fitfully upon the deck, their bodies curled like children, their dreams tangled with cries and roars that no silence can fully hush. Ariadne leans against the rail, her hair lifted by the wind, her eyes reflecting both relief and sorrow. She has chosen exile for love, yet her heart remains tied to the brother who died beneath the earth. Night deepens, and the stars wheel slowly above them, vast and indifferent. Theseus gazes upon them and wonders whether the gods look down with approval, or whether they merely watch, amused as mortals stagger through the roles laid out for them. He touches the hilt of his sword, still stained, and whispers to himself that this is no prize but a burden. He feels in his heart that the story of the Minotaur will not fade but will echo, reshaping itself in every retelling, and that he too will be remembered less for his own deeds than for the creature he slew. In Crete, silence coils more tightly around the palace. Minos keeps to his chambers, issuing decrees through intermediaries, his presence like a shadow stretched thin. He fears to face his wife's grief, his daughter's haunted eyes, the murmurs of his people. His pride demands he name the deed a triumph of order. Yet inwardly he knows it is an ending, The labyrinth without its prisoner is nothing but cold stone, and Palm without fear is a throne stripped bare. He walks his halls at night, listening for footsteps that no longer come, and the emptiness gnaws at him more than rebellion ever could. Pasiphae moves like a wraith, her beauty dimmed by sorrow. She leaves offerings at the threshold of the labyrinth, figs and honey, bowls of milk, as though her son might still taste them in some unseen realm. The guards avert their eyes, whispering that the queen has descended into madness. Yet in truth, she keeps alive the truth of Asterian's humanity. She remembers his gaze when he was small. The trust before fear taught him shame. Her prayers rise into the night, not for justice, not for vengeance, but that her son be remembered with tenderness in a world eager to brand him only as monster. Ariadne too lingers between worlds. She clings to Theseus, her devotion earnest. Yet she cannot banish the image of horns gleaming in torchlight, of eyes filled with unspoken longing. She dreams of the spool she gave, rolling endlessly, never finding an end, as though she herself is caught in the labyrinth. She wakes beside Theseus, her tears slipping silently while he sleeps, and wonders if love can truly carry her away from the shadow of Crete. She whispers her brother's name into the sea breeze, hoping it will carry to some place where spirits still listen. And what of Asterion? Though his body lies still, the memory of him refuses to settle into dust. The labyrinth breathes him still. The stones seem to hum faintly at night, the walls bearing impressions of his massive hands, the corners still echoing with the weight of his pacing. Some say his spirit walks the corridors, no longer hungry, no longer bound by flesh, but searching, endlessly searching for the fig sweetness, for his mother's song, for a name spoken gently. Others claim his shadow lingers not in stone but in dream, appearing to those who sleep near the palace, his gaze sorrowful, his horns no longer sharp but crowned in light. The island itself seems changed. The fields yield their harvests, but the workers move quietly, as though fearing to disturb something fragile beneath the soil. Children play, yet their songs sometimes twist into cries that mimic the low moan once heard from the labyrinth. Priests burn incense more fervently, seeking to cleanse the island of its past, yet the smoke drifts downward, sinking into the earth rather than rising toward heaven. The gods remain silent, watching as mortals struggle to understand whether they are freed or bereft. At sea the ship glides steadily, its black sails billowing like wings of morning. Theseus keeps his vigil at the prow, Ariadne beside him, her hand entwined with his, though her grip tightens and loosens as her thoughts drift. The waves sigh against the hull, their rhythm steady, their voice ancient. Somewhere beyond the horizon lies Athens, a city waiting to celebrate deliverance. Yet Theseus wonders whether celebration is worthy of what has been lost, for he knows that the Minotaur was not born to be a beast, but was shaped into one by pride, fear, and divine cruelty. The stars shimmer above, and for a moment, as his eyes blur with exhaustion, Theseus imagines he sees a constellation shaped like horns bending toward the earth. He closes his eyes and breathes deeply, letting the salt air steady him, but the image lingers in his mind, a reminder that the labyrinth may be far behind him, yet its shadow stretches long, carried not by stone but by memory. And so the ship sails on, carrying the living into dawn, while behind them an island mourns, and within the silence of the earth a name continues to echo, Asterion, neither forgotten nor forgiven, but eternal in the corridors of story. Asterion, neither forgotten nor forgiven, but eternal in the corridors of story. His name hovers like incense above the sea, drifting unseen yet inescapable, following the ship that bears Theseus and Ariadne toward a new horizon. The youths, weary from fear and deliverance, rest in uneven sleep, their bodies slack with exhaustion, their dreams still haunted by horns and torchlight. Only Ariadne lies awake beside the prow, her hair tossed by the night wind, her thoughts unravelling like thread too tightly wound. She has chosen love, but in her choice lingers the echo of betrayal. for her brother's shadow clings to her even as she leans against Theseus. The prince watches the sea in silence, his jaw set, his eyes unblinking. Victory has been claimed, yet it does not rest easily upon him. He feels the weight of the sword he still carries, the stain of blood that salt air cannot wash away. In his heart, triumph and sorrow sit uneasily together. He knows the songs sung in Athens will call him hero, saviour, breaker of curses. Yet he wonders whether the Minotaur's final cry will ring louder in memory than any chorus of praise. He has slain hunger embodied, yet in doing so has seen hunger's true shape, loneliness, longing, and exile without end. The sea, vast and restless, seems to mirror his thoughts. Waves roll endlessly, curling and breaking, as though enacting a ritual older than men or gods. Each crest shines pale beneath the moon, each trough swallows shadow, and in their rhythm, Theseus hears the echo of hoofbeats still. He grips the prow, steadying himself against the pull of recollection. But memory clings, as tenacious as barnacles, and he knows it will travel with him wherever the winds may lead. Back on Crete, Pasiphae keeps vigil. She lights no grand pyres, for her grief is not meant for spectacle. She kneels in hidden places of the palace, leaving bowls of milk, scattering figs, setting honey to drip upon the ground. She whispers Asterian's name with each offering, as though feeding his spirit in the realm beyond. The servants whisper that their queen has lost her senses, but she cares nothing for their judgment. She alone remembers his laughter, rare but bright, echoing faintly in corridors before shame silenced it. She alone recalls his trust before fear carved walls between him and the world. To her the labyrinth is not empty, it is full of his memory, and she tends it as one tends a shrine. Ariadne dreams of her brother too. She sees him not as a beast, but as a boy, his hand reaching for hers, his eyes wide with longing. In her dreams, she offers him the spool, but instead of guiding her away, the thread coils back into the labyrinth, binding them together in endless circles. She wakes with tears upon her cheeks, her body trembling as though she has been running through corridors all night. She clings to Theseus, seeking comfort, yet the comfort feels fragile, for she knows she cannot untangle love from sorrow. The people of Crete walk softly now. The labyrinth looms silent, its entrance sealed by command of the king, yet no one dares approach. Farmers crossing the fields claim they hear low moans carried by the wind, though the air is still. Fishermen swear that beneath the waves near the shore, shadows move that resemble horns cutting through water. Priests burn incense and chant longer into the night, as though hoping their voices might soothe the island itself. Yet unease lingers, for though the Minotaur's body lies dead, his presence feels stitched into the very earth. Minos, though unbending in public, cannot escape the hollowness within. He walks his palace with footsteps that echo too loudly, every chamber reminding him of absence. He dreams of horns gleaming in torchlight, of eyes that accuse without speaking, of corridors that close around him until he cannot breathe. He wakes in silence, his pride forbidding him to confess the fear that grows inside. He tells himself that order has been restored, that Athens is subdued, that his throne remains firm. But in truth he knows the foundation of his power has shifted, cracked by the death of the creature he once used to rule through terror. At sea, dawn spreads pale fingers across the horizon. The ship glides forward, sails filling with soft wind. The Athenians stir awake, their relief cautious, their faces still drawn from long fear. Theseus stands tall among them, yet his eyes remain shadowed. Ariadne watches him, seeing both strength and weariness, heroism and the quiet ache of memory. She wonders whether his heart will always dwell partly in the labyrinth, whether he too will forever hear the echo of her brother's final cry. The sun climbs, and the ship presses on. Yet, behind them, Crete does not fade from thought. The labyrinth remains in silence, its stone corridors holding not hunger but memory, a weight that cannot be undone. And somewhere in that silence, in the minds of those who loved him, and even in the heart of the one who killed him, Asterion lingers, no longer pacing with hooves and breath, but moving quietly in memory, eternal in the story that binds gods and mortals alike. The waves sigh, and the journey continues, yet every soul aboard knows that though they sail away from Crete, they cannot sail away from what remains within. Every soul aboard knows that though they sail away from Crete, they cannot sail away from what remains within. The sea stretches wide and gleaming, yet memory sails with them, heavier than cargo, lodged in the heart. Theseus feels it most, standing firm at the prow. But not alone, Ariadne clings to him, her eyes filled with both devotion and a sorrow she cannot voice. She has bound her fate to his, yet in dreams she still walks corridors with her brother, calling his name, hearing it swallowed by the dark. The ship cuts through waters that shimmer with sunlight by day and blaze with stars by night. The Athenians begin to laugh softly again, to taste bread without fear, to breathe without trembling. Yet at the edges of their relief lies silence, for no one dares to ask what it means to have survived. They have been spared the labyrinth's hunger, but each bears scars invisible, memories of a darkness that does not vanish with distance. Theseus listens to their laughter, and though it steadies him, he feels apart from it. His mind returns again and again to the final cry of Asterion, a sound both terrible and human, echoing still within him. He wonders if the gods intended for him to see not only the horror of the beast, but the sorrow of the man within. He does not share this thought, for he knows his people need him to be strong, untroubled, heroic. Yet in his solitude he admits to himself that he carries not only triumph, but also grief for the life twisted by divine cruelty into a thing of dread. On Crete, Pasiphae's mourning deepens. She walks alone through gardens heavy with blossoms, their scents cloying, almost cruel in their abundance. She brushes petals with trembling fingers, whispering Asterion's name, as if each bloom could carry it into the underworld. She leaves figs by fountains, honey at thresholds, milk upon the ground, offerings for a son denied peace in life. In the stillness she feels him near, not as monster but as child, his trust intact, his arms reaching. It is memory that nourishes her now, though it burns like salt upon her heart. Minos broods upon his throne, his crown heavy, his silence heavier still. He tells himself his reign remains firm, that fear will once more secure his rule. Yet he cannot banish the thought that with the labyrinth emptied, something essential has slipped beyond his grasp. His authority once drew strength from shadows, but shadows require a presence to cast them. Now, with Asterion gone, Crete feels exposed beneath the gaze of gods and men alike. He paces the palace halls, hearing only the echo of his own steps, a hollow sound that reminds him of corridors below. Ariadne, upon the ship, seeks to hold joy in her hands, but it slips like water. She leans upon Theseus, yet her eyes linger on the horizon behind them. In her mind, Crete rises like a phantom, the labyrinth standing unbroken though emptied, its silence calling her back. She wonders if she has betrayed blood for love, if her gift of the thread was salvation or treachery. Theseus assures her with gentle words, but words cannot silence the echo of horns in her heart. She loves him, yet she grieves still, for love does not erase memory. Night falls, and the stars blaze coldly above the ship. Theseus gazes upward, his thoughts drifting beyond the mortal sea. Among the constellations he imagines horns curving in light, a silent crown in the heavens. He whispers the name Asterion beneath his breath, uncertain whether he calls to the creature or the boy, or both. Ariadne hears and turns to him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She presses her face to his shoulder, and in silence they share the burden of remembrance. On the island left behind, the labyrinth remains sealed, yet the people still feel its breath. Farmers say their ploughs strike stone where none should be, as though the maize grows unseen beneath the soil. Fishermen claim the sea near its shore grows colder, darker, as though it swallows more light than water should. Priests speak of dreams filled with hoofbeats, of shadows pacing endless corridors. They burn incense, but the smoke coils downward, sinking into earth, feeding silence rather than dispelling it. Crete has been freed of hunger, yet bound by mourning. The journey continues, days stretching into nights, the sea carrying them closer to Athens. Yet in each heart aboard, the Minotaur lingers, not as devourer of youths, but as presence, as question, as wound. Theseus wonders if the tale will harden into triumph alone, stripped of sorrow, retold until the humanity of Asterion is lost. Ariadne fears it already slipping, that the brother she loved will be remembered only as a monster slain, never as a soul imprisoned, and Pasiphae, far behind, fights against that forgetting with every whispered prayer. The sea sighs, the stars glimmer, and still the story breathes, stretching onward, its end not yet told. The story breathes, stretching onward, its end not yet told. The sea grows restless, its face shifting under winds that rise from the south. The ship creaks as it leans into the waves, its sails dark wings beating against the sky. Theseus grips the tiller with steady hands, yet within him unease coils. He senses that the gods, who wove the labyrinth as both punishment and riddle, are not yet finished with him. Triumph seldom comes without a price, and he feels the weight of debt in the salt air. Ariadne watches the horizon, her eyes bright yet unsettled. She dreams of Athens, but also of what Athens may hold. A city eager for heroes, a people hungry for stories that erase sorrow. She fears her brother's name will vanish beneath applause, his humanity drowned by the roar of celebration. She turns to Theseus, searching his face for reassurance, but he is silent, lost in thought, and silence frightens her more than storms. She clings tighter to him, hoping her devotion might bind them both against whatever waits. Pasiphae, far away in Crete, kneels before altars now shunned by others. She whispers to gods who do not answer, her prayers curling upward like smoke that refuses to rise. She knows her son's story is slipping beyond her grasp, carried away on winds of rumour, reshaped by tongues eager to speak of monsters slain. She fears the world will forget the child named Asterion, and remember only the beast named Minotaur. Yet in her grief she steels herself to be memory's keeper. She will tell and retell to any who will listen, that he once reached for figs with gentle hands, that he once pressed his face to her breast in trust. Her voice alone cannot conquer forgetting, yet it resists, a single flame against wide darkness. The ship presses forward, but the sea conspires. Storm clouds gather, thunder muttering deep within their bellies. Rain lashes, wind howls, sails strain and groan. The Athenians cling to the deck, their newfound freedom threatened by the fury of Poseidon, who remembers old slights and balances them with storms. Theseus stands firm, yet even he feels small beneath the towering waves, each crest like a mountain rearing to swallow them. Ariadne's cries vanish into the wind, her hands clinging to him as though he alone anchors her to life. In that moment, Theseus remembers the labyrinth, the press of stone, the darkness swallowing light. He feels again the final cry of Asterion, the gaze that pierced him deeper than any horn could. The storm seems an echo of that cry, vast and sorrowful, and he wonders whether the gods themselves mourn the creature they condemned. He whispers the name Asterion into the storm, and though the wind tears the word away, he feels it acknowledged, as if the sea itself shudders in reply. The storm passes, leaving the ship battered but afloat, its timbers groaning, its sails torn but serviceable. The sea calms, glimmering once more beneath the indifferent stars. Yet in the hearts of those aboard, dread lingers. They have escaped both labyrinth and storm, yet fate's hand still hovers. Theseus feels it heavy upon his shoulder, a reminder that destiny is not gentle by a single victory. He looks toward Athens, and though it lies unseen beyond the horizon, He feels its weight already pressing upon him. Ariadne, exhausted from fear, leans against him, her hair damp, her face pale. She whispers of her brother in broken words, confessing her guilt, confessing her love for Theseus tangled with her grief for what she has lost. He holds her close, yet his silence deepens, for he knows choices must be made, and choices carve wounds that no thread can mend. He gazes at her as she sleeps at last, and though tenderness fills him, so too does unease, for he knows Athens demands more than love. It demands triumph unshadowed by sorrow, and in that demand lies betrayal waiting to unfold. Meanwhile, upon Crete, the labyrinth sleeps. Yet its silence grows heavy. Farmers say the earth trembles faintly at night, as though footsteps still wander below. Priests dream of horns carved from light, bending above them like constellations, eyes watching, neither forgiving nor condemning. Pasiphae wakes from such dreams with tears, whispering her son's name until dawn. She knows the world beyond her island shifts already, reshaping Asterion into myth, and she alone fears what will be lost in that retelling. The sea carries the ship onward, its rhythm steady, its sighs endless. Dawn spreads pale gold upon the water, and Athens waits beyond the horizon. Theseus stands tall at the prow, Ariadne resting against him. The youths huddled close in sleep, yet within each heart the labyrinth remains, its shadows, its sorrow, its single figure pacing endlessly, horned and human, remembered and forgotten, all at once. And so the ship sails, caught between storm and shore, between memory and myth, between love and destiny, carrying forward a story that will not rest until its last thread is drawn. The ship sails, caught between storm and shore, memory and myth, love and destiny. Days lengthen, nights soften, and the salt wind carries them steadily northward toward the Aegean's heart. Yet, though the sea smooths and the stars guide them faithfully, unease grows heavier than the waves. Ariadne senses it most keenly. She holds fast to Theseus, clinging to him with a devotion fierce as prayer. Yet when she looks into his eyes, she sees distance, as though his gaze is fixed on some horizon she cannot share. She does not speak of her fear aloud, but in her chest it gnaws. She has betrayed her father, abandoned her mother, surrendered her home and her heritage for love. She has bound her fate to Theseus with the courage of one who leaps into fire, yet she wonders if his heart burns as hers does, or if he is already slipping away, his thoughts claimed by the weight of kingship, by the story Athens demands of him. In her dreams she still walks the labyrinth, hand in hand with her brother, and when she wakes she finds only the roll of the ship, only the sigh of waves, only the silence of the man beside her. Theseus loves her, yet his love is troubled by burden. He thinks of Athens waiting, his father with weary eyes, his people with open arms, the heralds ready to carve his triumph into marble and song. He knows they will not understand Ariadne, daughter of Minos, sister of the beast he slew. They will not see the thread she gave him, the courage in her betrayal, the cost of her choice. They will see only an outsider, a stranger whose presence reminds them of their dead. He wrestles in silence, his heart divided between gratitude and the fear of what must come. The ship glides into calm waters at last, and they make landfall on an island cloaked in cypress and laurel. The sailors rejoice, eager for solid ground, for sweet water and olives, for rest after the storm's battering. Theseus leads them ashore, his face stern, his steps steady. Ariadne follows, her eyes alight with hope that this pause will ease the distance between them. She dreams of a life beyond fear, of a place where love might root and grow. She sees in the island a promise, a chance for them to weave a new beginning together, but destiny is not softened by hope. Theseus walks apart, wrestling with the truth he cannot escape. He loves her, yet Athens will not. He owes her his life, yet his people will not forgive the daughter of Minos. He watches her smile as she gathers wild flowers, her laughter faint but bright, and his heart twists with guilt, for even as he watches, he knows he cannot take her home. He cannot bind her fate to his without unraveling his own. His silence becomes a wall higher than any labyrinth. Ariadne feels it, even as she bends to pluck blossoms. She senses the coldness of his distance, the weight of his silence pressing against her joy. She tries to pierce it with her laughter, tries to coax him back into closeness, but the air between them thickens. She walks the shore alone, her feet pressing shapes into the sand, her thoughts circling like doves in search of rest. She whispers her brother's name into the sea breeze, and the wind carries it back to her as though mocking, as though reminding her that betrayal cannot be undone. In Crete, Pasiphae still whispers that name too, pouring milk upon the earth, scattering figs beneath the stars. She dreams of Ariadne, her daughter's face pale, her eyes haunted, and wakes with a cry that chills the servants who hear. She knows loss upon loss, a son slain, a daughter gone, her own heart a hollow chamber where laughter once echoed. She prays not for herself but for Ariadne, fearing she too may be devoured, not by hunger of beast, but by hunger of fate, relentless and unkind.
Minos listens to none of this. He closes his ears to sorrow, fortifying his throne with silence. He tells himself Ariadne is lost to him, that her betrayal is death enough, that no grief need be spent on her. Yet in his solitude he feels the wound keenly, though pride forbids confession. His halls are emptier than before, his power brittle as clay, his nights restless with dreams of horns and thread, cries and silence.
On the island where the ship has paused, the moon rises, washing the shore in silver. Ariadne lies awake beside Theseus, her heart thrumming with unease. She watches him sleep, his face stern even in slumber, his jaw tight as if against words unspoken. She reaches for him, her hand trembling, but stops short as though touching him might break what fragile bond remains. She curls into herself instead, the sand still clinging to her feet, the night wrapping her in loneliness she dares not name, and beyond the moonlit shore, the sea sighs, carrying memory like a current. It whispers of labyrinths, of names that will not die, of stories that bend hearts long after bodies fall. It whispers of Asterion, still pacing in silence, eternal in shadow, shaping the destiny of those who once called him monster, those who once called him brother. The night deepens, and with it the gulf between love and duty, between promise and betrayal. The gulf between love and duty, between promise and betrayal, widens as the days pass upon that island shore. Ariadne wakes to find herself alone more often, Theseus walking the cliffs or sitting apart, his eyes turned not toward her but toward horizons unseen. She feels him slipping away like sand through fingers, no matter how tightly she tries to hold. She follows him sometimes, her steps soft, her heart pleading, but his silence answers more loudly than words ever could. One evening, as twilight paints the sea in hues of violet and gold, he speaks at last. His words are gentle, yet their weight crushes. Athens awaits him, Athens demands him. Athens cannot receive her. He cannot say her name without sorrow, cannot meet her eyes without shame. He tries to frame it as destiny, as necessity, as burden he cannot bend, but the truth gleams through. He has chosen his crown above her love. Ariadne listens in silence. Her heart does not break with shouts or tears, but with stillness, a quiet surrender. She understands, for she has long seen it in his eyes, yet knowledge does not soften pain. She thinks of her brother, trapped in the labyrinth, abandoned to darkness, betrayed by gods and men alike. She feels in her chest that she too is labyrinth-bound now, her heart a maze of love and grief with no thread to guide her out. That night she dreams of Asterion. He does not appear as beast, but as boy, his eyes soft, his hand reaching. He leads her through corridors not of stone but of stars, winding paths of light where silence hums with peace. She wakes with tears upon her cheeks, but also with strength. She knows she will be left, but she will not vanish. She will carry her brother's memory as shield and crown, even if the world forgets. At dawn, Theseus makes ready. The sailors hoist sails. The ship trembles with the wind's pull. Ariadne stands upon the shore, her hair streaming in the morning light, her face calm, though her soul rages within. She does not beg him to stay, does not plead. She watches as the ship glides from the bay, its dark sails swelling like the wing of some vast bird. Theseus looks back once, his face unreadable across the widening water. She lifts her hand, not in farewell but in acknowledgement, as though sealing a truth between them. The ship vanishes into horizon's haze, and Ariadne remains, alone among cypress and laurel, the sea sighing its endless song. She walks the shore barefoot, her footprints washed quickly away, yet her resolve endures. She whispers Estyrion's name to the waves, as she always has, and now feels her own name twined with his. Too cast aside, too betrayed, yet not erased. In her solitude she discovers a strange kinship with her brother's fate, abandoned not for who she is, but for what others have made of her. In Crete, Pasiphae feels a new grief pierce her heart, sudden and sharp. She knows without messenger that her daughter is gone, not by death, but by desertion. She weeps quietly, pressing her palms against the cool stone walls of her chamber. She imagines Ariadne upon some distant shore, her hair tangled by sea wind, her heart heavy yet unbroken. She whispers to her across the silence, mother to daughter, grief to grief, prayer to prayer. She does not know if the gods listen, but she prays still, that Ariadne may find in her solitude what peace Asterion never knew. Minos, though silent, also feels the wound. He has lost son and daughter both, though his pride will not let him admit. He cloaks himself in decrees and processions, but when night falls, he paces the empty halls as though searching for footsteps he will never hear again. His throne feels cold beneath him, his crown heavier with each passing day. He tells himself the gods have balanced accounts, yet within him grows the dread that their reckoning has only begun. Theseus sails toward Athens, his heart clenched. He tells himself he has done what he must. That duty outweighs desire, yet as the sea wind cools his face, he feels Ariadne's absence like a hollow that nothing will fill. He knows songs will call him hero, but in quiet moments he fears the songs will also chain him, freezing him as symbol while life ebbs away. He does not speak of this to his crew, for they cheer their freedom, their deliverance. Yet when he closes his eyes, he sees not victory but the gaze of a boy with horns, and the stillness of a woman left upon a shore. The sea swallows silence, the island shrinks into memory, and the story moves inexorably onward. The labyrinth is far behind, yet its shadow stretches, binding all who touched it. In Pasiphae's grief, in Ariadne's solitude, in Minos's pride, in Theseus's unease, the Minotaur still lives, not as beast, but as echo, as reminder, as eternal question of love, abandonment, and the weight of destiny. And though the sails carry Theseus closer to triumph, the gods watch with eyes unreadable, and the sea remembers everything. The sea remembers everything. Its waves lap gently against the black-hulled ship, rocking the Athenians closer to the home they long for. Laughter stirs among them again, cautious but growing. Like young shoots after storm, they speak of embraces awaiting them, of parents saved from grief, of a city freed from tribute. Yet amid their joy, Theseus grows heavier within, his silence deepening like the fathoms beneath the keel. The memory of Ariadne lingers with him. He sees her still upon that island shore, her hair streaming, her hand lifted in a gesture too calm to be farewell. He feels the echo of her devotion, the warmth of her hand guiding the spool, the courage of her betrayal of Crete. He knows he owes her everything, yet he has left her with nothing. The weight of kingship presses against his chest like stone. Yet even kingship feels diminished by the thought of her absence. He stands at the prow, his face fixed toward Athens, but his heart strains backward toward a cypress-shadowed island, where silence now enfolds her. The gods, too, are watching, unseen but near. Poseidon, whose storms Theseus barely survived, still broods, his wrath never easily spent. Athena, wise and far-seeing, tilts her gaze toward the young prince, her eyes filled not with judgment but with curiosity. What shape will his choices take? What kingdom will he build from triumph shadowed by betrayal? And in Hades' halls whispers move like smoke, for the name Asterion travels downward, carried by prayers of mother and sister, carried by memory. The dead too know his story now, and even among shades it strikes as tragedy. In Crete, Pasiphae lights another lamp. Her hands trembling, she places it at the threshold of the labyrinth. Though its stones are sealed and its hunger silenced, she speaks aloud her son's name, a ritual she refuses to let vanish. To her, Asterion still lives, not in flesh, but in the rhythm of remembrance. She sings to him softly, lullabies once whispered in secret, and her voice trembles but does not falter. The guards hear her song and avert their eyes, for even hardened men feel unease when grief becomes hymn. Minos hears the song too, carried faintly through colonnades. His jaw hardens, his pride insists on silence, but in the quiet of his chamber he cannot banish the echo. He has lost his son to the labyrinth, his daughter to love and abandonment, his queen to sorrow. His kingdom still stands, but within him hollows widen. He walks his halls as if patrolling ruins, each statue and pillar a reminder of power bound to grief. He wonders if the gods set him upon the throne not to rule, but to suffer, each glory laced with loss. Meanwhile, Ariadne endures upon the island, her days marked by solitude, her nights by dreams of labyrinthine light. She gathers fruit from trees, drinks from springs, walks the cliffs where sea swallows sky. At first she weeps, her cries swallowed by waves, but as time passes her sorrow transforms. She begins to feel her brother near, not in haunting but in kinship. She whispers his name into the sea wind, and in return she feels calm descend, as if Asterion's spirit watches beside her. Betrayal remains, but loneliness softens into strange companionship. She is no longer only sister to a monster or lover left behind. She becomes guardian of memory, vessel of a truth too easily forgotten. Theseus draws closer to Athens. He sees the hills rising pale against the horizon, the city's walls like white teeth, biting the sky. His heart races, for triumph awaits, yet unease coils still. He knows the people will cry his name, lift him upon their shoulders, praise him as slayer of the Minotaur, but he wonders whether they will ever know the truth of what he saw. A creature who moaned with longing, whose eyes shone with humanity caught in sorrow. He fears his silence will feed the forgetting, that Ariadne's dread will come true, that her brother will be remembered only as beast, never as soul. Night falls once more, and the stars blaze bright. Theseus looks upward, and again he sees the horns traced in constellations bending gently above him. He bows his head, whispering Asterion's name so softly no one else can hear. He feels the name settle within him like a stone, a burden but also a reminder. He knows that though songs may flatten truth, memory will not wholly die so long as even one heart carries it forward. He vows quietly to himself, though he does not yet know how, that he will not let Asterion be erased. The ship presses on, nearing its harbour. Athens waits with torches and garlands, but within the prince's heart the labyrinth still stirs, its silence alive, its story unfinished. And upon the waves between island and shore, memory travels too, whispering of horns and thread, of love and abandonment, of the strange tragic mystery of being trapped in a fate one did not choose. And so, just as the lights of Athens begin to glimmer faintly across the water, the sea sighs once more, as if reminding all who listen that stories do not end with walls or crowns, but live on in echo, in grief and in the hearts of those who remember. The sea sighs as if reminding all who listen that stories do not end with walls or crowns, but live on in echo and grief. The black-sailed ship glides steadily now, Athens rising nearer each dawn. The city waits with garlands, with horns ready to proclaim, with voices eager to shout Theseus's name as victor, saviour, breaker of tribute. Yet within the prince, silence holds stronger than celebration. His eyes measure not garlands but graves, not horns but horns of another kind, those that crowned Asterion, gleaming dimly in the labyrinth's last light. The sailors sing softly as they near their home, their voices tentative, fragile hymns to freedom. They praise the gods who carried them safe, though in their hearts they know storms and sorrows had nearly claimed them. They speak of parents awaiting on the shore, of Athens rising proud, of a city made whole. Their joy fills the ship, but it cannot enter Theseus's chest. He stands apart, gazing into waters that shimmer with reflections of stars, his thoughts heavier than stone. The gods too keep watch. Poseidon still stirs with grudges, for he has not forgotten insults dealt by kings and sons alike. Athena watches keenly, her wisdom tracing threads through men's choices, noting how love and abandonment entwine like strands of fate. Even Hades feels the weight of this story, for Asterion walks now among shades, a presence neither cursed nor blessed, but remembered. In the quiet realms beneath the earth, whispers spread of the boy who became monster, of the monster who was more than beast, of a name spoken still by mother, sister, and even the slayer himself. On Crete, Persephone kneels once more beside sealed stone. The labyrinth sleeps, but she keeps her vigil alive. Her lamp burns each night. Her offerings never fail. She sings lullabies, though her voice breaks, though her hair is streaked with grief's silver. To her, Asterion is not gone. He lingers in air and earth, in dream and silence, in memory that no decree can erase. Her sorrow is vast, yet within it lies devotion stronger than kings. She alone will keep his true story alive, even when the world prefers the tale of a beast defeated. Ariadne, far away upon her island, begins to change. At first abandonment carved hollows in her heart, but time shapes hollows into vessels. She drinks from springs, walks beneath laurel and cypress, gathers fruit with her own hands. Her solitude becomes less wound and more mirror. Showing her strength, she whispers Asterion's name each dawn and dusk, and sometimes in the hush of twilight she feels a calm settle over her like his hand upon her shoulder. Betrayal no longer defines her. Memory does. She becomes in her loneliness a guardian of truth, just as her mother is, though their voices cannot meet across the sea. Minos, in his palace, grows more brittle with each passing season. He hides behind decrees, commands, the rituals of rule. Yet in the stillness of night, when torches gutter and servants sleep, he hears again the faint scrape of horns against stone, the tread of hooves that no longer walk. He wakes with sweat upon his brow, pride his only shield. He tells himself his throne is unshaken, yet in truth he knows the labyrinth defined him, and without its prisoner, he rules not with dread, but with emptiness. The ship nears Athens at last, its sails filling with morning light. Theseus sees the city rising, white walls gleaming, hills crowned with temples. He feels the weight of triumph pressing closer, a crown too heavy to lift with ease. He knows he will be hailed as hero, his story sung in squares and sanctuaries. Yet he fears what songs will omit, the sorrow of Pasiphae, the devotion of Ariadne, the humanity of Asterion. He fears silence will devour truth, that memory will be lost in favour of legend sharpened into glory. He bows his head, whispering once more the name Asterion, letting it fall into the sea like an offering. The waves receive it quietly, carrying it where they will, to shores seen and unseen, to depths where shadows linger, to halls of gods who listen in silence. Theseus straightens then, his face set, his heart heavy yet resolute. He cannot undo fate, but he can remember, even if the world forgets. The city waits with garlands and horns, but the labyrinth waits also, quiet and unseen, eternal in stone and in story. And within that labyrinth, sealed silent, but alive in memory, the Minotaur lingers, pacing not with hunger now, but with the echo of his name. And as the prow of the ship cuts into waters lit with dawn, the story bends toward its end, though its echoes will not fade. The ship's prow touched the waters of Athens' harbour as dawn unveiled the city in pale fire. Trumpets prepared to sound, priests gathered with garlands, and families waited with open arms. Yet for Theseus the air seemed heavy, hushed by memory. He knew the people would see only triumph. The hero who had braved Crete, the warrior who slew the Minotaur, the prince who freed them from yearly sacrifice. But within him another truth stirred, one he dared not voice, one that would live only in the quiet chambers of his heart. He carried Asterion's image with him still, not as beast, but as brother of Ariadne, son of Pasiphae, child of a house that had bound him in darkness. He remembered the weight of the Minotaur's gaze, the mixture of fury and sorrow, the cry that was not only monstrous but almost human. That sound haunted him more than the clash of horns or the stink of the labyrinth. It was the sound of a soul half forgotten by the world. As the ship drew closer, Theseus lifted his eyes to the Acropolis rising above the city. Marble shone like bone in the morning sun, sacred and enduring. He wondered what songs would be carved upon stone, what tales priests would chant, what statues would rise. He knew they would glorify the slayer, not the slain. And so, silently, he made his own vow, that in his prayers at least, the name Asterion would not vanish. Far across the sea, Ariadne walked her island paths, her bare feet brushing grasses, jewelled with dew. She no longer wept each night, though grief remained woven into her soul. She had become something new, tempered by abandonment, transformed by memory. When she looked at the stars, she saw horns traced in constellations, silver arcs guarding the heavens. She whispered to them, not in despair but in reverence, offering her brother a place among eternal lights. She did not know that Dionysus, god of ecstasy and wine, watched her with growing interest, his heart stirred by her resilience, her beauty, her sorrow turned into strength. Destiny moved toward her still, but gently, like a tide not yet breaking. In Crete, Pasiphae continued her vigil. The labyrinth was sealed, its stones cold and inert, yet each evening she lit her lamp and placed it near the hidden entrance. Her song carried into the night, a hymn for the son whom the world had misnamed. For her the Minotaur was never monster but child. However cursed, however bound, in her devotion lay the truth the poets would not sing. Her love outlasted politics, crowns, and even the silence of death. Minos himself aged beneath the weight of fate. Power no longer thrilled him, victories rang hollow, and the glory of Crete dimmed with each passing year. He saw that control over men and seas could not quiet the echoes within his own halls. The labyrinth, though empty, still defined him. He walked its perimeter sometimes at night, his steps restless, his heart uneasy. Perhaps he wondered then, though pride forbade him to admit it, whether he had built not a prison for his shame, but a tomb for his compassion. And so the story spread across islands and coasts, in markets and temples. The people spoke of a monster slain, of a hero crowned, of Athens freed. Children played at Theseus with sticks for swords, striking at imagined beasts. Priests offered sacrifice to Poseidon, to Athena, to Zeus, for deliverance. And in the shaping of this tale, something essential slipped away, the half-forgotten humanity of Asterion, the sorrow of Pasiphae, the devotion of Ariadne. Yet memory is stubborn, even as legends hardened into song. Whispers lingered, of eyes that wept, of a heart that longed, of a soul trapped in fate's labyrinth. The gods allowed the tale to twist. For mortals are ever eager to simplify, to paint in bold lines rather than subtle shades. Yet in the still places, the hush between waves, the quiet within caves, the silence of midnight fields, the fuller truth remained alive. Nature itself remembered, bulls lowed with deeper sorrow, labyrinthine shells washed ashore, stars curved their horns across heaven's roof. And so, even as Theseus walked into Athens to be hailed king, even as Ariadne stood poised for her own strange destiny, even as Minos brooded in his palace, the mystery of the Minotaur endured. He was monster and man, curse and child, feared and loved. His labyrinth was not only stone but the chambers of the human heart, where love and shame, duty and desire, light and darkness coil together. As the tale comes to rest, the listener is left not with victory alone, but with reflection. The Minotaur's story is one of entrapment, yes, but also of memory's endurance, of compassion persisting through silence, of humanity glimpsed even in the monstrous. His echo lives on, not in walls but in whispers, not in chains but in stars. And so may the memory of Asterion remain, gentle yet solemn, a reminder that every labyrinth hides both terror and tenderness, and every monster's face may yet conceal a soul longing to be known. The waves close softly over the past, the stars shine on above, and the story at last exhales into stillness.